Chapter 375. Boss, pay attention to your feet when you walk. It's summer now. You can't tell what's in the grass. Pull it out with your spear when you walk. Looking at Jiang Hai beside him, Bell Lester whispered to him. Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also nodded, indicating that he understood. He used his August to pull out the grass around him. While walking, he observed the situation of this small forest. Boss, I'll lead the way. Seeing Jiang Hai's cautiousness, Harriman Fells behind him couldn't help laughing. Harriman Fells actually didn't talk much with Jiang Hai. Because this person had some problems with his intelligence, when he spoke, he would often speak half a beat slower. That is to say, when he is talking to you, he suddenly disconnects and becomes silent. Then it may take an hour or two before he remembers, but by this time, the person talking to him has already left. It was precisely because of this relationship that he didn't have a good life in the town. However, he really loved and respected Jiang Hai because Jiang Hai gave him food and shelter, and also gave him a bonus. At the same time, Jiang Hai was also very willing to accept him like his colleagues. This made Harriman have a very good impression of Jiang Hai. Although he usually didn't show it, to be honest, he was the most active and serious person here. This didn't mean that others weren't serious, but after they finished what they should do, even if they took the initiative to do something, it wouldn't be too much. But he really cared about the grass and trees here. The most famous thing was that whenever Jiang Hai's cows were about to give birth, Harriman would go and watch them at night. Although Jiang Hai didn't say these things clearly, he knew it. Every month, Harriman received the most bonuses from Jiang Hai's cowboys, but no one was jealous of him. Instead, they were very happy for him. They were happy that he found a good job, and they were happy that he had a good boss. Usually, he did the most tiring and troublesome work, cleaning up the cow dung, but he didn't complain. Now that he heard that there was danger in the grass ahead, he took the initiative to come forward and help. However, Jiang Hai waved his hand to stop him. Because of Harriman's identity, he was the only one who didn't have a gun among the six. Because the gun seller didn't know if he would be a threat to the people around him after he took a gun. So today, he only took a huge machete, which was originally custom-made by Jiang Hai. In the United States, guns were allowed, but the management of cold weapons was extremely strict. Not to mention crossbows, even swords, knives, and daggers. If you dared to take them out on the street, the police would investigate you. After Jiang Hai came, he bought some outdoor cold weapons, but they were all placed at home as decorations. For example, some bows and arrows, or some equipment from the game. Especially when Jiang Hai had the financial resources and found that he only needed to order these things online, he was even happier. Although he couldn't take them out, it was good to put them at home. Occasionally, he could take them out to show off. So there were a lot of these things hanging on the wall of his corridor, most of which were from the game. For example, the most famous one, Frostmourne, of course, had no magic. It was just an ordinary big sword. There were also Azanatha's double blades, Thunder's Fury, Quell, Sarah, and so on. The original version of the sword in Harriman's hand was the Fallen Ashbringer. Naturally, it didn't have the flash effect of the original version, but it was really good looking. This big sword was originally Jiang Hai's, but once he organized a party at home. After Harriman took a fancy to it, Jiang Hai gave this big sword to him. After he polished it with a machine, it really looked good when he carried it on his back. At least in Jiang Hai's view, it was quite scary. At least, it scared him. It's okay, you don't have to worry about me. If I can't solve the problem, you can't solve it either. Patting Harriman on the shoulder, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Harriman looked at Jiang Hai in front of him, who was half a head shorter than him, and couldn't help but nod a little woodenly. He had fought with Jiang Hai before. Of course, it was just for fun, but he knew very well that Jiang Hai was much stronger than him. Seeing that Harriman didn't speak, Jiang Hai continued to walk forward, and the others who followed him also looked around vigilantly. Jiang Hai's group of 6 had all kinds of things. For example, Jiang Hai had a spear, a big desert eagle, and Belle had a spear, a handgun, and a pistol. As for the three old men, they had all kinds of equipment. Burke-Dollar had a double-barreled shotgun, a cowboy hat that he wouldn't take off no matter how hot it was, and a smoking pipe in his mouth. He looked like an old ruffian. This guy had always been quiet, but Jiang Hai heard that he was very happy recently. Because Jiang Hai had split the money last time, he paid all the alimony he owed his daughter in one go, which surprised his ex-wife and daughter. Later, his daughter learned from Moses Adams that her father could really make a lot of money with Jiang Hai, and the relationship between the family gradually eased. The reason why they were so hostile to him was mainly because they expected better from him, although not all places in the world were filled with money. However, it was undeniable that there were too many people who judged a person's ability based on their net worth. This was especially true in the United States, where money was more important than relationships. As for Eleanor Cece and Andrew Christian, who were walking at the back, the weapons they used were more conventional. They used the most common Remington, which was the weapon with the highest civilian sales in the United States. This kind of weapon didn't require too much training, because the bullets used were different, and the effect would be different. If it was a shotgun, it would hit a large area. Not only was it powerful, but the effect was also not bad. It could also be used for self-defense. Fishermen liked to use this kind of weapon, because it was very effective against sharks in the sea. Of course, in the sea, the scariest thing was not sharks, but people. This was something that everyone who had been out to sea knew. This time, they were hunting mountain lions. To be honest, it was easier for these two to catch sharks than mountain lions. Therefore, they were more or less worried. When they were worried, they would be nervous. When they were nervous, they would stop talking. Therefore, after Jiang Hai and Harriman's conversation ended, the whole team was silent again. The only thing that entered Jiang Hai's ears was the sound of the wind blowing the leaves and grass, and the chirping of birds in the distance. Even the insects might have felt the murderous aura from the 6 people and chose to shut up at this time. The 6 people gradually moved inside and saw more animals. The first to bear the brunt was the animal that lived at the bottom of the food chain, the wild rabbit. As Jiang Hai and the others moved forward, they saw many rabbits flash by. If it wasn't for the mountain lion hunt, Jiang Hai really wanted to kill a few. In Jiang Hai's manner, rabbits were not a disaster. However, there were definitely a lot of them, at least dozens of times more than cows. On the grassland, there were many rabbit holes. Sometimes, when Xiao Bai and Little Huang were not full or wanted to play, they would catch rabbits on the grassland. He even caught it and gave it to Jiang Hai to eat. However, wild rabbits don't taste good. Domesticated rabbits don't have any taste. Therefore, whatever it was made with, it would taste the same. Plus, it was marinated with pepper and starch, chicken soup, mountain delicacies, and so on. The taste was quite good. Bashu's famous dish, Bashu rammed rabbit, and dried rabbit meat pot, which was quite famous. It cured a lot of people who don't eat rabbit meat, but wild rabbits don't taste very good. This was because they were born with a smell of game, which was the smell of soil. Other game, other than the smell of soil, also had its own smell. However, rabbits had no smell. This kind of rabbit had a pure soil smell, and it was not delicious to cook. It would only taste good if it was marinated for a long time to get rid of the soil smell. However, the problem was that it was troublesome to cook. Therefore, although Jiang Hai's rabbits were very round, Jiang Hai had no love for this kind of rabbit. However, just because he did not like it, it did not mean that others did not like it. For example, Jiang Hai's Little Huang, Xiao Bai, and the many cattle dogs he raised were all diehard fans of these rabbits, especially the target that Jiang Hai wanted to catch this time. If not for these rabbits, he would not have come. However, before Jiang Hai got rid of the soil smell of these rabbits, it was unlikely that he would come to catch them. Compared to rabbits, there was another kind of game that Jiang Hai liked to eat. That was pheasant. In fact, wyverns were also a kind of pheasant. However, Jiang Hai was talking about proper pheasants. There were many pheasants in this forest. The lean meat on their bodies was more than the fat, but the most important thing was that there was oil in the lean meat. After being cooked, the meat was very firm and not dry, and it was very fragrant. However, these pheasants needed to be more careful. Their brains did not allow them to go to places where there were no trees, so they did not move outside of the forest. This made many people lose the opportunity to eat them. However, for Jiang Hai, it did not matter because he could go in and catch them at any time. Since they walked into the forest, rabbits and pheasants were the things they saw the most. Chapter 376. To be honest, with Jiang Hai's nourishment of spiritual energy, the mountain lion was not the only animal attracted. Jiang Hai's manor was not far from the Alabama mountains. Although it was not close, some small animals with a large territory had already regarded Jiang Hai's manor as their home. Entering the forest, when Jiang Hai came here last winter, besides some birds, turkeys, rabbits, pheasants, and some small squirrels, there were almost no other creatures here. But this year, when Jiang Hai came again, there were more and more creatures, especially small animals. In addition to the insects that would disappear in the winter, there were also a large number of amphibians, a variety of birds, even snakes and lizards. There were a lot of them here. Although there were no large greenhorns, according to Jiang Hai's estimation, if there were no fences, it wouldn't be long before this place became a protected wildlife area in the Alabama mountains. Jiang Hai did not dislike animals. He liked animals very much. On one hand, he liked to eat them. On the other hand, he also liked small animals. He liked small cats, small dogs, and large beasts. Looking at the lively scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was very pleased. The group walked slowly into the forest. In addition to Jiang Hai, Belle, who was walking side by side with Jiang Hai, had been observing the surrounding situation. If there was any trouble, he would react immediately. Jiang Hai's forest was not big. It was only about 100 acres. According to the rules, 1 acre was equal to 15 mu, and 1 acre was equal to 666 square meters. Jiang Hai's forest was about 1 million square meters, which was about 1 square kilometer. According to the domestic calculation, it was about 2 bus stops horizontally and 2 bus stops vertically. In fact, it was not very big. However, Jiang Hai's forest was not very wide. It was only about 300 meters wide, and the rest was long. The original purpose of this forest was to protect the grassland and buildings in the manor from storms and snowstorms. Therefore, half a circle was planted along the sea. After more than 10 years of development, the forest had grown. The trees had grown into towering trees. There were also many small trees that were slowly growing. They were already more than 1 size bigger than before. If he were to measure it now, the area occupied by these trees might be even larger. However, Jiang Hai did not care. Having more trees was a good thing for him. Of course, these trees were also Jiang Hai's private property. If one day he did not like them, he could cut them down. They were all his property. Boss, be careful. Just when Jiang Hai was sighing with emotion about the rich species here, Belle, who was walking in front of him, suddenly pulled Jiang Hai. This shocked Jiang Hai, and then he began to look around. But after looking around, he did not find any threat. He couldn't help but look at Belle strangely. Feeling Jiang Hai's gaze, Belle pointed in front of Jiang Hai. Looking at the direction of his finger, Jiang Hai found that about 1 meter in front of him, there was a spider web hanging above his head. At this time, there were many small cocoons on the spider's web. These were not eggs that were hatching, but insects that were wrapped in cocoons. They were also the spider's dinner. As for the owner of this web, it was hanging in a corner of the web, motionless. Damn, a spider. Looking at this guy, Jiang Hai couldn't help but whisper. This spider didn't look big, about 2 centimeters, less than 3 centimeters. Its body was dark, but there was a little red behind its buttocks. This is a black widow, a very common spider in the United States. It is the most poisonous of all spiders, but boss, you don't have to worry about it. The toxicity of this spider is not much of a threat to humans. Except for the elderly, children, and the sick, ordinary people will only feel a lot of pain when bitten. Basically, there is no danger to their life. Seeing Jiang Hai's shocked look, Belle also smiled and said, "They have dealt with these little guys all year round. Black Widow is not fatal?" Hearing Belle's words, Jiang Hai felt a little incredulous. He always heard that after being bitten by a Black Widow, something will happen. Now someone suddenly told him that this thing is not fatal. It's really hard for him to believe. We often ambush in the wild, and being bitten by this kind of thing has become a habit. To be honest, the pain of this thing is really not small, so it's better for us to avoid it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Belle also smiled and led Jiang Hai to avoid this spider web. Black Widow is not fatal, then is there anything fatal in this forest? Although Jiang Hai took a detour, he was still very curious. He looked at Belle and asked. After Belle heard Jiang Hai's words, he also looked around. That thing is more fatal. Pointing to the distance, Belle said to Jiang Hai lightly. Jiang Hai looked around and found that the place he pointed to was a huge beehive. Jiang Hai really didn't notice it when he came here last time. When did such a big beehive form here? A beehive means that there is honey here. I guess the wild honey inside will taste good. Looking at the beehive in front of him, Jiang Hai whispered, but after listening to his words, not only Belle looked at him in amusement, even Burke Dollar behind him, Eleanor Cece, and Andrew Christian looked at him with a smile. Only Harriman Fells was still firm. Boss, that thing can't be provoked, that is a killer bee. In the end, it was Belle who told Jiang Hai. The so-called killer bees are also called African bees. They are divided into two kinds, honeybees and wasps. Honeybees are actually similar to ordinary bees, but they have a violent temper and extremely strong combat power, while wasps eat other pests and bees. They can be regarded as the guardians of the forest. Among these bees, the most threatening one is the hybrid version of European and African bees. This kind of bee is the largest, with the strongest attack power, stronger vitality, and amazing combat power. According to records, in the past few decades, hundreds of people have been stung to death by this kind of bee, and countless cats and dogs have died unnatural deaths. Other than adult bears that can compete with them, other creatures have to run away when they see them. The grass on Jiang Hai's grassland is very good, and the flowers that grow naturally are also very good. They produce a lot of honey and are rich in nutrients. Because of the nutrition, Jiang Hai's beehive, which was originally not very special, has become a lot bigger this year. Compared to the Black Widow, the killer bee is much more powerful. Of course, this is something that Jiang Hai just found out. In North America, there are 12 King Kong, representing 12 kinds of animals. Although it is not like Australia, where poisonous animals are everywhere, there are naturally many poisonous animals here. The killer bee is ranked first, the rattlesnake is ranked second, the Gila lizard is ranked third, the Black Widow is ranked fourth, the alligator is ranked fifth, and there are cottonmouthed snakes, tiger sharks, cougars, spotted rattlesnakes, brown bears, and so on. These things are not particularly threatening to humans, but the premise is that humans do not provoke them. Looking at Jiang Hai's curious look, Belle also smiled and explained to him. But halfway through, Harriman Ferns, who was behind them, suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed the two men. Just when the two men were surprised, they found that everyone behind them squatted down. At the same time, Burke Dahlia pointed to the distance. Following the direction he pointed, Jiang Hai and Belle also squatted down and looked in that direction. Their eyes couldn't help but light up, because at this time, in the forest clearing in the distance, their target had appeared. But what's not right is that Jiang Hai's target was only one mountain lion, but now it has become 6. The biggest one, which was also the one that Jiang Hai once fought, was lying under the sun and taking a nap. Beside it, there were 5 little guys that looked very small. They were playing around it, and in the center of their play, there was a creature. Jiang Hai also knew this creature. It was the armadillo known as the American pangolin. At this time, it was curled up into a ball. The shell of this creature could bounce off bullets, not to mention the claws and teeth of a lion. The female mountain lion probably knew that she couldn't do anything to this guy, so she let her children play with this guy as a toy. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Then they all looked at Jiang Hai, because they didn't know what to do next. Should they continue or go to the Animal Conservation Center and take these little guys away? To be honest, Jiang Hai was also a little hesitant, because these little guys are quite cute. But after all, these guys were ferocious beasts. If they grew up and attacked his family, it would be troublesome. However, chasing them away like this was quite troublesome. He never expected that the female mountain lion, who was still alone the last time he saw her, would give birth so quickly. Furthermore, she gave birth to 5 cubs. Mountain lions could only give birth to 6 cubs at most. This fellow was really impressive. She gave birth to 5 cubs by herself. Most importantly, these 5 cubs looked pretty good. Just as Jiang Hai was a little hesitant about this, thinking about whether to chase them away himself or inform the protection center, the female mountain lion suddenly stood up. Suddenly, the lioness stood up and stared at the surroundings. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai and the others were startled. They thought that they had been exposed. Just as Jiang Hai was about to attack, a loud cry came from the bushes on their side. Then a huge wild boar came running from the bushes in the distance. When he saw this guy, Jiang Hai was also shocked because there were no wild boars in this forest. What's going on with this wild boar? In fact, what Jiang Hai didn't know was that most animals can swim, including wild boars. Since the mountain lion could swim to Jiang Hai, it was naturally possible for wild boars to do the same. If Jiang Hai looked carefully, there were actually many surprises waiting for him in this small forest. Chapter 377. Humans were very contradictory creatures. For example, humans always claimed that all creatures were equal and that nature was sovereign. But they also said that the train ran fast because of the front of the train. A snake could not function without a head. Of course, everyone had their own reasons. There was nothing much to say. Humans liked to rank humans. Who was the boss, the second, the third, the fourth, and so on. There was not only a ranking based on age, but also a ranking based on ability. For example, the famous Liangshan Lake. Back then, he and Zhu Yingtai. Cough, he seemed to have made a mistake. Anyway, humans liked to rank things. There was no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. Everything had its own strengths and weaknesses. Animals were humans' neighbors on this planet, so they naturally liked to arrange seats for these animals. Huaxia's old driver once said that there were 1 pig, 2 bears, and 3 tigers in the forest. Of course, this did not mean that wild boars were more powerful than bears and tigers. It was just that such creatures were the biggest threat to other creatures in the forest, or in the natural world. Because pigs were really stupid. Someone once said, "No, pigs are actually very smart." That was referring to domesticated pigs as well as pet hunters. Real wild boars were really stupid. Other animals were very vigilant and knew to run when they encountered danger. However, the wild boar would not do that. Once it encountered danger, the wild boar's first reaction would be to see if it could beat it. Especially an adult wild boar with a large body. That was truly not an ordinary cannon. In the natural world, wild boars had almost no natural enemies. The creatures that mainly ate wild boars were large carnivorous creatures such as tigers and lions. But in North America, these things did not exist. The largest carnivorous creature in North America was the jaguar, also known as the jaguar. It was basically about the size of a leopard. How could a leopard be useful against a wild boar? Naturally, mountain lions were useless. And the North American gray wolf, which was a huge threat to wild boars, had long been extinct. As for bears, to be honest, it was unknown whether they could beat a wild boar. Most importantly, they couldn't outrun a wild boar. Therefore, wild boars were really a local tyrant in North America. In addition, hunting wild animals in the United States, including wild boars, required a hunting license, except for people like Jiang Hai who had his own manor. Hunting animals for no reason would lead to imprisonment, which made wild boars quite bold. Not only did they dominate the forest, they even dared to attack human cars and homes. When the wild boar was full of confidence, it would often take the initiative to attack other animals or humans. It was really bold. Just like now, the wild boar had wandered into Jiang Hai's manor for some unknown reason. Now that it saw the mountain lion, it instantly launched an attack. However, the mountain lion was not to be trifled with. It had obviously fought with this guy before. Seeing the wild boar rushing over, the mountain lion quickly reacted. It jumped up immediately, turned its body inconceivably in the air, and dodged the wild boar's first attack. The wild boar mainly used two methods to fight. One was to hit, and the other was to bite. If it hit, it would use its powerful impact like a tank to hit straight at the opponent. Then, it would use the big teeth on its head to tear the opponent's skin. As long as it hit, it would probably be over if it wasn't treated in time. The second move was to bite. After landing on the ground, the mountain lion gave a low roar to the 5 little guys behind it. The 5 little guys were very intelligent and quickly ran to hide in the grass in the distance. They didn't want to delay the battle between their mother and the big stupid pig. But coincidentally, this time, the place where they hid turned out to be Jiang Hai's side. As the grass was pushed aside, the 5 little guys and Jiang Hai's group looked at each other. They could clearly see a flash of surprise in Jiang Hai's eyes, and the 5 little guys' eyes also flashed a trace of surprise. Scratch, scratch, scratch. After the surprise, the 5 little guys immediately cried out. Although they had never seen humans before, the feeling engraved in their genes let them know that the humans in front of them were not harmless. Hearing the cries of her children, the mother mountain lion, who was confronting the wild boar, could not help but be stunned. She immediately turned to look at the grass and saw Jiang Hai's group at a glance. A trace of surprise and a trace of fear flashed in her eyes. Because at this moment, she also saw Xiao Bai and Xiao Huang, who caused her injuries. These 2 guys were out-and-out bad guys. Thinking that her children had fallen into the hands of these people and the 2 monsters, the mother mountain lion was also stunned. She turned around and wanted to save her children, but unfortunately, she forgot that there was still an enemy opposite her. Although the wild boar's brain was not very good, it still knew how to seize the opportunity. Seeing that the mountain lion was distracted, it stomped on the ground with its short limbs and rushed over in an instant. Its huge fangs pierced towards the mother mountain lion's stomach. Hearing the sound of hooves stomping on the ground, the mother mountain lion also reacted. By the time she wanted to dodge, it was already too late. Although she jumped up, the wild boar raised its head and its huge fangs instantly pierced into her stomach. Then, with a swing of its head, it threw her far away. With her stomach pierced, the mother mountain lion instantly lost her combat strength and could not help but lie there panting heavily. The wild boar that replaced the mother mountain lion's position also saw Jiang Hai and the others immediately. It had just finished off a lion. Although it was only a mountain lion, this wild boar's confidence reached its limit. It did not care if Jiang Hai and the others had guns or not. It immediately rushed towards Jiang Hai and the others. The wild boar was very fast. Although Jiang Hai and the others had already drawn their guns when they saw it, the effect was not very good. Many of the bullets fired by the panicked Jiang Hai and the others missed that guy. Out of the 5 bullets that Jiang Hai had fired, 3 of them had missed, and 2 of them had hit this guy's body. However, there was a thick layer of mud on the wild boar's body. When the sun shone on it, it was like armor. After most of the impact of the bullets was offset by this layer of mud armor, they could only penetrate the wild boar's skin but could not cause much damage to it. At the same time, in order not to hurt the 5 little guys in front of them, the shotguns behind them were useless. The only one who hit the wild boar's head was Bell, but at such a close distance, his long gun was not good. He used a pistol and the pistol's bullets were not very powerful. Just like that, it was stuck on the wild boar's head. This kind of pain made the wild boar even crazier. It did not give Jiang Hai and the others any chance at all and directly rushed towards them. Seeing this, Halaman, who had been behind Jiang Hai, turned sideways and flashed from Jiang Hai's side. The steel broadsword in his hand had already been swung and smashed heavily towards the wild boar in front of him. With a loud bang, the broadsword and the wild boar's teeth collided. Halaman's strength was not small, but he was still hit by the wild boar and could not help but take 3 steps back. As for the wild boar, it was also a little stunned. Its original momentum could not help but slow down. It stood still and shook its head. This blow also stunned it. At least it had never encountered such a blow before. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai knew that this was an opportunity. Because the distance between the two was too close, Jiang Hai didn't pull his Desert Eagle. Instead, he took a big stride and jumped into the air. At the same time, he loudly called Harriman's name. When Harriman heard Jiang Hai's words, he knew what Jiang Hai wanted to do. So he instantly threw the broadsword to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai caught the double-handed broadsword in the air and instantly pressed it down. Cold weapons such as sabers and swords were made of steel. The harder the cold weapon was, the more brittle it was. The more flexible the cold weapon was, the less sharp it was. Jiang Hai did not think about what to do with these cold weapons before. Now it was the era of hot weapons. Although these cold weapons were not eliminated, they were almost obsolete. Therefore, his steel materials were all ordinary recovered steel. Their hardness was only 57, but that was enough. The skin of the wild boar, which was difficult to be cut by bullets, was directly cut by the blade when Jiang Hai pressed it down. Along the wild boar's neck, Jiang Hai pressed all the way down and directly cut half of the wild boar's spine. With half of the spine broken, the wild boar's nerves that controlled its body were naturally broken. It fell to the ground and began to twitch. Blood was constantly spurting out. Fortunately, Jiang Hai had already hidden to the side, otherwise, his face would have been sprayed. Looking at the wild boar that had lost its ability to fight and was waiting for death, Jiang Hai heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he turned around and looked at the mountain lion family behind him. At this moment, the 5 little fellows had already run to the female mountain lion's side and could not help but cry out for mercy. However, the female mountain lion had already lost its ability to fight. If the wild boar was doomed, then if the mountain lion did not save it now, it would also be doomed. Although Jiang Hai had always wanted to chase it out of the manor, Jiang Hai had never intended to kill it. But Jiang Hai really didn't want to hurt its life. Of course, if this guy attacked humans or Jiang Hai's cattle and sheep, Jiang Hai wouldn't let it go. Now, looking at it and its 5 little lions, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little moved. Looking at the wild boar that was certain to die, Jiang Hai walked in front of the mountain lion. As soon as he walked over, the 5 little fellows looked at Jiang Hai and bared their teeth as if saying, "You're not allowed to bully my mother." As for the big mountain lion, her eyes were filled with terror and fear. Unfortunately, she could not move now. She could only pant as she watched Jiang Hai squat in front of her. Looking at the mountain lion in front of him, Jiang Hai said, "If you die, they will be orphans." Looking at the mountain lion and the 5 little fellows in front of him, Jiang Hai curled his lips. Sometimes, he hated his personality. Chapter 378. Boss, are you sure you don't want to catch those little guys? You know, they're lions too. Seeing Jiang Hai walk out of the forest, Eleanor, Cece couldn't help but ask. This is indeed a very troublesome matter. Let's wait until they have the tendency to attack. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled but didn't say much. Because he was confident that these guys wouldn't have any tendency to attack in the future. Just now, Jiang Hai clearly had the opportunity to get rid of the mountain lion family. But looking at their pitiful appearance, Jiang Hai gave up in the end. Sometimes, he's too soft-hearted. But just like what Eleanor, Cece said, those are lions, so Jiang Hai has to be careful. So before leaving, he injected a stream of spiritual energy into the lioness, and the 5 little lions split the spiritual energy equally. This spiritual energy should be enough to make them recognize him as their master, although it won't be as good as taming dogs. After all, the amount of spiritual energy used was too little. Jiang Hai used more than 20 drops of blood and a lot of spiritual energy to tame Big Fool. This is the difficulty of taming wild animals. Currently, Jiang Hai doesn't want these mountain lions to become his pets. As long as they don't attack people, Jiang Hai can't be bothered. Anyway, the wild rabbits and pheasants in this forest can be caught all year round. Jiang Hai doesn't care. But he also informed Big Fool that in the future, large animals can't be allowed to come to this area. This time it's a mountain lion, next time it might be a brown bear or a polar bear. Jiang Hai is a little afraid when facing these things. Since Jiang Hai said that he won't care about these mountain lions for the time being, Eleanor, Cece and the others also looked at each other. Although the mountain lions are a little threatening, they don't care because the mountain lions are seriously injured this time. They don't know the magical use of Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, but judging from the scene just now, this mountain lion is doomed. As for the 5 little guys, without their mother, even if they were in Jiang Hai's forest, it would probably be very difficult for them to survive. So they didn't comment on Jiang Hai's pity and left with Jiang Hai. After they left the forest, it seemed that everything in the world was moving forward according to its original trajectory. Time passed minute by minute, the sun rose and set, and everything was happening step by step. Things like the opening of the World Expo, the British general election, and so on had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. As for things related to him, he also paid attention to them. The first was his manner. In late May, Zhang Dihai and the Walmart group both came to visit. Maybe because of the incident in Atlantic City, Pra Walton didn't come in person this time. Instead, she sent her assistant. She was also a beauty, but she wasn't very friendly to Jiang Hai. She completed the handover mechanically with Jiang Hai. The second batch of 2,000 cows was sent to the slaughterhouse, and the 300 cows from Zhang Dihai's side were also sent to the slaughterhouse. Originally, he planned to complete the handover 6 times, but now it seems that 4 times is enough. The only one who hadn't made a move yet was Chi Li in the capital, but it was useless for Chi Li to be anxious. The decoration of the Western restaurant was basically completed, but it would take a while to release the flavor, so she had been contacting the air transport company and the warehouse recently. She was also very ambitious about Jiang Hai's beef. Of course, she also knew a little about the relationship between Jiang Hai, Feng Yunchen, and Ai Xiaoxi. But what made her very conflicted was that, just as Feng Yunchen thought, because of Jiang Hai, it was very difficult for her to deal with these 2 women. She really felt a little afraid of shooting the rat for fear of breaking the vases. But no matter what she thought, time was still passing, and she was still busy. She didn't know what would happen between her and Jiang Hai in the future. After the cows were separated and slaughtered, Jiang Hai's account had more than $300 million. There were also a lot fewer cows in the manor, but Jiang Hai's cowboys were very happy, because the cows were really worth a lot of money. Jiang Hai and Clive didn't spend a lot of time together recently. Actually, it wasn't that they didn't spend a lot of time together, but that they didn't spend any time together at all. With the development of the town, Clive's own standards were still quite good. She was transferred to the town hall by the mayor, and was mainly responsible for the planning and implementation of the tourist guide issue. Winthrop's town hall had also submitted to the state their written opinion on wanting to turn the town into a tourist attraction, as well as the application for the project and the application for the route of the tour group. Of course, the state actually had a lot of ideas about this huge project worth several $100 million, but unfortunately, this was a cooperation between Shanghai and the town hall. Unlike in China, the state government and the town government were relatively independent when it came to political issues. Even if they wanted to intervene, they couldn't. This was different from the top to bottom in China. Here, they could directly cooperate with the lowest level. This also saved a lot of trouble. Of course, this had nothing to do with Shanghai. Although the Massachusetts state government was a little depressed, Winthrop was still their county after all. If a county engaged in tourism, it would be a good thing for them if its GDP increased. Therefore, the things they submitted were all approved. Now, they just had to wait and see what would happen after these things were built. Shanghai wasn't a stingy boss. Of course, he wasn't a boss who spent money in vain. He would give the money, but at least he had to know where the details of the money went. He was also the most strict when it came to quality. If the quality wasn't good, he would directly reject the work. He didn't care about any hidden rules or what the foreman did to the materials. He had the right to supervise, and everything was up to him. In addition, Moses Adams was a lawyer who wholeheartedly stood by Shanghai's side. He really couldn't tolerate even the slightest bit of sand in his eyes. When the work was just being built, there was once a construction company who changed the steel bars from 3 to 2. Shanghai directly refused to use them. Then, he sued, forced the demolition, and found a new construction team to do it again. These people would definitely make money from his project, and they would make a lot of money. If they still wanted to make some extra money, then sorry, they would lose a lot of money. Moses Adams specialized in this kind of work. He wouldn't let these people take advantage of him. Except for the chaos in the beginning, after a few days, after several construction teams and suppliers changed, the construction in Winthrop entered the fastest stage. New streets began to be built, new villas were set up by the sea, new shops began to appear, and a new shooting range was being expanded. Seeing the whole town in full swing, the townspeople were very happy. This was because they knew that as long as this tourist spot was built, regardless of whether Shanghai and the town would make money, at least they would have another way to make money. Every day, seeing these workers busy in the town, everyone felt very happy, because it also represented hope. Shanghai didn't know whether it was the hope of the townspeople, but after his 6th failed attempt to ask Sh-20 Clive out, he was a little disappointed. To be honest, Shanghai's feelings for Sh-20 Clive were the deepest. It could be said that this girl was the person he liked the most, but liking her was not love, nor was it responsibility. There were no real problems between them, so Shanghai and Sh-20 Clive were a little uncertain. The closer a relationship was, the more distant it would be if they didn't contact each other for a long time. Shanghai felt that Sh-20 Clive was not ready to enter his world, but she did have a good impression of him. However, if this continued, who knew? Shanghai casually threw his phone on the sofa next to him. He was speechless as he looked at the ceiling. He was sorting out his feelings. At the same time, the faces of those who had a relationship with him and could become his girlfriend also flashed in front of his eyes. The first one that flashed by was Feng Yunchen. Although at the beginning, Shanghai and she only dated for one night, after those days, Shanghai's feelings seemed to have changed. However, Shanghai knew that there would be no result between them, and she didn't want to be his lover yet. The second face that flashed by was Ai Xiaoxi. Shanghai was not very familiar with this girl. She gave him her most precious thing, but she also didn't express her feelings, just like Feng Yunchen. This was also something that Shanghai couldn't figure out. After the two girls, it was Sh-20 Clive. Then, it was Selena Gomez, who made a mistake that night. After that, Chi Li's face also flashed by, but it was only for a moment before it was chased out of Shanghai's mind. For Shanghai, when he left home and prepared to fight for his PhD, it was already impossible for him to be with Chi Li. Although the person he knew the most was Chi Li, to be honest, Chi Li's chances were the smallest. At this time, Jianghai was no longer as empty as he was a few months ago when he went to town primary school. Now, his heart was filled with many people, many women. In addition to the above people, there were the most important Delina and Marion. There was also Aphrodite, who didn't seem to care about those accidents at all, and the other 9 girls. But after looking around, it seemed that there really wasn't anyone who could stay with him for the rest of his life. I'm really a jinx. He patted his forehead, feeling that he was really a failure of a rich man. In the past, when he read novels and TV series, Jianghai didn't know if the rich people, lovers, and so on changed, but at least there was always someone around him. But now, Jianghai didn't even have anyone around him. Those who went out to play naturally didn't count. If he had a real girlfriend, he would restrain himself a little. But the problem now was that he didn't even have a real girlfriend. What should Jianghai do? No matter how big or small, he was also a billionaire. He couldn't just use little left and right. Just as Jianghai was sighing with emotion that the most loyal partner in his life was by his side, a beautiful figure came to his manor. Chapter 379. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Just as Jianghai was struggling, the doorbell suddenly rang. This surprised Jianghai a little, because it seems that people who often go in and out of his manor know the password of the manor's gate. Of course, no one knows the password of his villa, but the password of the gate is actually not a secret. Even Shenticlive and Karmacliff know that Moses Adams has gained Jianghai's trust after the Miami incident. At least, he knows the secret of the gate, and people who don't know the password of his gate, generally speaking, will not come to his place. Looking at the time, it's past 2:00 in the afternoon. It doesn't seem to be the time to receive guests. But although he was curious, Jianghai still stood up. No matter who it is, they will know. Hello, who is this? Picking up the phone in the villa, Jianghai looked at the picture recorded by the camera. It's me. In the camera, an Asian face appeared in front of him. Hearing Jianghai's words, she said calmly. Hearing this person's words and this person's appearance, Jianghai suddenly remembered who she was. Dr. Bernice, please come in, come in. After Jianghai said a sentence, he immediately opened the door and walked out of his villa. At this time, outside the villa, Daliana and Marion were playing with their flower field outside the house. When they saw Jianghai coming out, they looked at Jianghai curiously, their eyes full of questions. Go and wash up, Dr. Bernice is here. Seeing the confusion in the eyes of the 2 girls, Jianghai explained with a smile. As soon as they heard that Bernice was coming, the 2 girls immediately stood up and ran into the house. For the female doctor who examined them, the 2 girls still have a good impression of her, so they naturally have to clean up a little. Looking at their flower field, Jianghai also showed a gentle smile on his face. Perhaps because of their previous lives, the 2 girls were somewhat repulsed by the outside world. Even if they were cured now, they were still too similar to normal children. They would absorb all the knowledge that Shenticlive taught them. They also understood and accepted new things, but they didn't like them very much. For example, they didn't like the games that children of their age were playing. They also didn't like Facebook, including Twitter and all kinds of things on the internet. They didn't like it. Even the craziest fans of their age didn't like it. It could be said that Jianghai couldn't do anything about it. Fearing that the 2 girls would become autistic, Shenticlive had told them to do some extracurricular activities instead of just watching TV or running around the manor all day. After all, they were already big girls now. After the new year, although they had not celebrated their birthdays, according to Hua Xia, these 2 girls were already 15 years old. Girls in the 3rd grade of middle school were naturally considered big girls. Just as Jianghai was thinking about how to cultivate their extracurricular interests, they found a job of their own, which was planting flowers. At first, they just planted some ordinary plants, such as cacti, aloe, and so on. However, now they already knew how to use their pocket money to buy beautiful flowers online. The place where they were going to plant flowers was about 1 mu of land. This flower field was well taken care of by the two girls. There were all kinds of flowers in it. Although it was planted a little late, the growth was still very good. Now, many of them had already sprouted. Just as Jiang Hai was observing the garden, Penny came over from afar. Compared to the last time Jiang Hai saw her, when she was wearing a white coat, she was much more easygoing this time. Bernice is not ugly. She can be said to be very good-looking, comparable to Chi Li. Moreover, her character reminds Jiang Hai of the woman who gave him a headache. Even the taste of clothes is not much different between the two of them. Penny also liked to wear tough women's clothes. For example, she was wearing a white lace shirt on her upper body. Her lower body was a pair of ordinary jeans and a pair of ordinary sneakers. Her hair was neatly tied behind her head. Carrying a suitcase, she walked in just like that. It was simple, but revealed a sense of freedom and handsomeness. "Welcome, welcome. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I'll pick you up at the airport." Seeing Penny coming over, Jiang Hai immediately greeted her with a smile and said with a serious face. He owed this woman a favor, so naturally, he had to please her. "Is this your manner? The environment is really good." But unfortunately, his warm face seemed to be stuck to Penny's cold butt. Penny did not appreciate Jiang Hai's enthusiasm. She ignored Jiang Hai's hand that reached over to help her carry the suitcase. At the same time, she looked around and said indifferently, "Ugh, hee, here it is. This is the residential area, that is the winery, then the cowshed and the grazing area, and a little further away is the fishing ground. We have a big beach here. If you have nothing to do, you can go and play." Hearing Penny's words, Jiang Hai also took back his hand, although he really wanted to leave without this girl. She was a guest, so Jiang Hai temporarily suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and introduced his manner. "Sorry, I usually only concentrate on research. I came to the United States when I was 16 years old and have been studying. I don't have many friends. Clive is one of my few friends, so I don't know much about human affairs. If I offended you in any way, please forgive me." Maybe she heard the stiffness in Jiang Hai's words and the embarrassment on his face. Penny was stunned for a moment, then said to Jiang Hai faintly. Hearing her explanation, although Jiang Hai was still a little speechless, at least the other party explained it, so he felt better in his heart. No longer caring about her, Jiang Hai directly led her into his villa. As soon as he walked through the door of the villa, he saw Daliana and Marian running in from upstairs. Seeing Penny, the two stood respectfully beside her. "Hello, this is a gift for you." Seeing Daliana and Marian, Penny forced a smile on her face. Then she opened her bag and took out a stack of bracelets from it. She picked 2 pink bracelets and handed them to the 2 girls. After receiving the bracelets, the 2 girls were a little confused. "What's the use of this thing?" "This is something that our research institute has just developed. It is still a sample and has not been put on the market. This bracelet has electromagnetism and a miniature intelligent small head inside. The whole bracelet is made of pure silver. Not only can it sterilize, but it can also promote blood circulation. Not only can it make calls and record steps, but it can also monitor your heart and lung functions, the quality of your sleep at night, and so on. It is very useful." Looking at the 2 girls' strange faces, Penny also explained to them. Of course, at the same time, she did not forget to give one to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai didn't expect that he would also have this thing. Holding it in his hand, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Jiang Hai didn't know if this bracelet had the same effect as Bernice said. But when he picked up the bracelet, he felt as if he was drinking tea. The speed at which he absorbed spiritual energy from the outside world slowly increased. "It's really useful." Looking at the bracelet in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. He didn't know how this thing could increase his speed of absorbing spiritual energy. Was it because of the electromagnetism inside, or was it because of the silver? But it was unlikely that it was because of the silver. Because Jiang Hai had fished out a lot of silver coins from the deep sea. But even when he was about to sleep, there was no other effect. Was it because of the electromagnetism? If it was really because of this, then Jiang Hai would have to think about it carefully. He would ask Penny about the electromagnetism and whether she could make a big one. This way, his leveling speed would be faster. In fact, to put it bluntly, Jiang Hai's current life was mainly about enjoyment. This was because he didn't have much to strive for. He didn't have much ambition. His manner and his own ability could guarantee that he would live well in this world. Although some people said that a person without dreams was no different from a salted fish. But as far as the current situation was concerned, Jiang Hai really didn't have any dreams. He just wanted to enjoy his life like this. He didn't have any ambition to become the world's livestock king. He also didn't intend to enter real estate or IT. He just wanted to make money steadily. This was the way of the king. Now, the only obsession in his heart was the problem of leveling up. This problem had been pressing on Jiang Hai's mind for a long time. It was really a bit unbearable for him. In Jiang Hai's view, this problem was even more important than the problem of finding his other half. Thank you. Then Jiang Hai also received the gift. Daliana and Marian also nodded and said thank you. After that, they took the initiative to help Bernice drag her big box in. From today onwards, I will stay with you for a while, and your patient will probably come the day after tomorrow. If it is convenient for you, I will have to trouble you to pick him up. Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice turned her head and said to him, "Oh, no problem." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also reacted and said with a smile. This was the agreement between Jiang Hai and Penny. She helped Jiang Hai to show proof, including medical certificates, health certificates, and so on. Don't underestimate these certificates. These things are not difficult to get if you have connections in China. According to Jiang Hai's friends in China, these things can be easily obtained as long as he returns to China. But in the United States, it is quite difficult to get. Chapter 380. The biggest difference between Huaxia and the United States was that in Huaxia, relationships were important. But in the United States, to be honest, relationships were not important. Americans cared more about benefits and relationships, which were not popular in the United States. Tea cools down when people are gone. This was the mainstream in China, and even more so in the United States. Therefore, there was almost no back door for medical treatment, taxation, and so on, especially in the medical field. The United States had a very strong national regulation. Some drugs' content could not be lower by even a little bit. It was also very important for medical treatment. All the hospitals in the United States were connected to the internet. You saw a doctor in Miami, and you saw another doctor in Washington. Your previous medical records can be found here. What medicine you took, what symptoms you had, and so on, could all be seen. Therefore, the diagnosis that Bernice made for Jiang Hai was very risky. If she did not do it well, not only would she lose her doctor's license, but even the research institute would be closed down. That was why Jiang Hai said that he owed her a favor. According to her, the condition of this favor was to treat a person for her. According to her, this person was her sister. She had albinism since she was a child. She didn't care how the protagonist cured her. As long as she was cured, it was enough. It could be regarded as returning her favor. She came here first to decorate the room her sister was going to decorate when she came. Jiang Hai naturally didn't have anything against it. After carrying her luggage upstairs, Jiang Hai chatted with her briefly, and then went downstairs to prepare dinner. After all, it was Bernice's first time here, so Jiang Hai prepared a rich dinner. Lobster and beef, this was inevitable. In addition, there were many other delicacies. Basically, when people came to Jiang Hai's place, Jiang Hai would make these things for them to eat. This was his way of treating his guests. At least, he would carefully select the food. After leaving the villa, Jiang Hai drove the four-wheeled motorcycle to the beach. After greeting Edward Anderson there, he went to the sea and caught 2 big lobsters. After that, Jiang Hai went back to prepare dinner. When Bernice came downstairs, Jiang Hai's dinner was almost ready. I can't eat much. You don't have to trouble yourself. Bernice went to the kitchen to see that Jiang Hai was busy. She was a little surprised because Jiang Hai's food was really rich. There were 2 lobsters, one steamed and the other baked with cheese. There were also 2 beef dishes, one steak and one beef stewed with burgundy wine. There were also some vegetarian dishes. It looked like there was a lot of food, and the taste was definitely not wrong. It's okay. We ate like this when we were lonely. If we couldn't finish it, we gave it to them. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai smiled. At the same time, he pointed his chin at Xiao Bai and Goldie, who were squatting not far behind her. When she saw the 2 dogs, Bernice was shocked because she didn't see them when she came in just now. Now that she saw them, her eyes couldn't help but brighten. In fact, Bernice likes dogs, especially big dogs. In her eyes, Xiao Bai and Goldie are very beautiful dogs. She couldn't help but take 2 steps toward them. However, when she stretched out her hand and wanted to touch the 2 little guys, Goldie and Xiao Bai stood up and ran away. They knew that Bernice was Jiang Hai's guest, so they can't attack her. If it were an ordinary person, how could they approach them? They would have already pounced on them. But now, they just ran away, that's all. Your dogs are really smart, but it's best for dogs not to eat human food, because it's too salty and too oily. It's not good for their bodies. Generally speaking, dogs have to be fed special dog food. Looking at the 2 dogs running away, Bernice also knew that they didn't welcome her, so she didn't follow them. Instead, she squatted down and looked at the 2 dogs. Oh, it's okay. In fact, before Jiang Hai raised the dog, he had also heard about this. But after raising the dog, he didn't care about it anymore. The food he fed had spiritual energy in it, so naturally, he wanted to abuse the dog food. Okay. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice also shrugged. Since the owner didn't care, then she, as an outsider, shouldn't say more. Looking at the 2 dogs carefully, Bernice became more and more surprised. These 2 dogs were quite strong, their eyes were clear, their hair was unusually soft, and they didn't have any smell. This made her, who has been paying attention to the dogs, couldn't help but feel that these 2 dogs were really well raised by Jiang Hai. If they participate in the competition, it shouldn't be a problem for them to get a ranking. Just as she was engrossed in her observation, Jiang Hai had already served the dishes. Delina, Marian, eat, Dr. Bernice, eat. After shouting upstairs, Jiang Hai also said to Bernice, who was squatting there. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice couldn't help but smile, stood up and walked to the dining room. At this time, Daliana and Marian, who were upstairs, also quickly ran down. After saying a few words to Bernice, they sat in their seats. After Jiang Hai brought the last bread, everyone was ready to eat. Come, have a taste of my beef. It's one of the specialties here. In accordance with the principle of hospitality, Jiang Hai first forked a large piece of steak for Bernice and put it on her plate, then he got his own. After Bernice nodded to Jiang Hai, she cut a small piece of steak and stuffed it into her mouth. But as soon as she stuffed it in, her eyes suddenly lit up. Compared with Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi in China, Bernice is obviously a person who has eaten good food. She opened a research institute in the United States, so she is definitely considered to be in the upper class. For her, although premium grade of beef is also very luxurious, but it is not to the extent that she can't eat it. But now, when she ate Jiang Hai's beef, she was a little surprised. Because this beef, although it is very bad, according to the highest standard abroad, the level of a 3-star chef in a Michelin restaurant, Jiang Hai is not even a half-star, no, he is not even a professional chef, but the taste of the beef surprised her. This beef tastes great. Is this the Japanese 5-grade Wagyu beef? Looking at the beef in front of her, Bernice said in surprise. Oh, this is not the Japanese Wagyu beef, but the beef in my manor. If you want to eat more, I have a lot here. Jiang Hai's favorite thing to do is to watch others praise his beef. This is the most satisfying time for him. Have a lot? This kind of beef is only produced in the middle of the brain and eye meat. Your rules here are not particularly big. Do you have a lot of cows? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice asked curiously while stuffing beef into her mouth. Not too much, but I have a way to increase the output of this beef. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai didn't say too much, but he also revealed some of his specialties. Hearing this, Bernice thought for a moment and put down the knife. What's wrong? Not to your taste? Seeing her put down the knife, Jiang Hai asked strangely. No, it's delicious, but I treat you as a friend. I don't care what you do, but have you ever thought that if your beef is targeted by someone with bad intentions, when your wealth is also noticed by the authorities, how will you explain the source of the beef? Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice said with a serious look on her face. What do you mean? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but froze for a moment. He really didn't think about this problem before. In his opinion, the United States is a country that protects personal privacy. In his own manner, he can do whatever he wants, others can't control him, but he forgot that even if the United States is a country that protects privacy. But the authorities also have political power. If he makes a small fuss and no one pays attention to it, what if someone pays attention to it? Now he can make more than 1 billion yuan a year with cows. What if he can make billions when he can? Now he can already make a lot of premium grade beef. What if the price is still rising? Jiang Hai didn't think about this before, but now that Bernice mentioned it, Jiang Hai subconsciously thought about it. It wasn't that Jiang Haiki was worried about the future and only thought about the worst-case scenario. She had to take precautions against these things before they happened. It's literally what it means. Looking at Jiang Hai, Bernice picked up the knife again. She knew that Jiang Hai understood her words. Although Jiang Hai doesn't look very smart, he should be able to figure out what is going on. In this world, there is no absolute light and absolute justice. Moreover, when Jiang Hai's method of raising cattle attracted the attention of the United States top officials and they wanted to promote this method, if Jiang Hai didn't agree, then he would be a typical example of the opposite. For the interests of the majority, sacrificing the interests of the minority, this is the most solid principle in this world. Then, what should we do? Hearing her words, this time it was Jiang Hai's turn to not eat. Originally, he still wanted to stay in his own weaving environment. In this environment, he wanted to live like this for the rest of his life, but now it seems a bit difficult. There are two ways, one is to treat the symptoms, the other is to treat the root cause. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, Bernice said slowly. What do you mean by treating the symptoms? Hearing that she really has a way, Jiang Hai was also a little surprised and asked curiously. Treating the cup is to find someone to rely on, but I don't think you will do this, and when this person loses power or changes, this umbrella will be useless, and it will cost a lot of money. Cutting another piece of beef and stuffing it into her mouth, Bernice said. What about the root cause? Indeed, according to Jiang Hai's character, he is unlikely to do this. If he really wants to do this, then there is no need for him to go abroad. In China, he is afraid that his gains will be inexplicably taken away by others, so he chose to go abroad. If it is the same abroad, then what is the difference between him and China? Come up with a scientific condition that can be convincing, preferably one that can't be replicated by others. Looking at the slightly panicked Jiang Hai, Bernice continued to eat the beef indifferently, but her words made Jiang Hai's depressed mood a little better in an instant. Chapter 381. While Jiang Hai was studying Bernice's words, on the other side of the ocean, in Jiang Hai's motherland, it was 8:00 in the morning. It was time to go to work. As the capital, every street in the capital was crowded at this time. To be honest, the speed of the traffic was much slower than the speed of bicycles. Most of the cars were firmly stuck on the road. They were listening to the radio, cursing the traffic, anxiously looking at their watches, praying that their boss would arrive later today. In front of a high-class office building, an obviously new Mercedes-Benz SLK quickly flashed out of the traffic in the distance. After a slight flaw, well, actually a flaw, almost hitting a roadside trash can, the car stopped in front of the office building. Then the door of the front passenger seat opened, and a fashionably dressed girl walked out from inside. "You go up first, I'll park the car." Looking at the girl who got out of the car, another woman sitting in the driver's seat said to her with a smile. If Jiang Hai was here, he would definitely recognize these two people. The driver was Feng Yunshen, and the one sitting in the car was Ai Xiaoxi. Since returning from the United States, many days have passed unknowingly. These two girls were very busy these days. The next day, Feng Yunshen said goodbye to her former boss. Of course, her boss did not lack a woman like her. With the increasing pressure of the recent policies, he was happy for Feng Yunshen to leave, so he did not say anything. Then Feng Yunshen sold the house she was living in now. With the money from the sale of the house and the money Jiang Hai gave her, she bought a house on the edge of the Third Ring Road in the capital. It was a very good neighborhood with 2 bedrooms. It cost her a total of nearly 7 million yuan. But there was still a lot of money left. Then she transferred the money back to her hometown and asked her family to buy her a 3-bedroom house in Bing City. There was a big difference between the housing prices in the capital and in Bing City. A 2-bedroom house in the capital cost 6 to 7 million yuan, but in Bing City, a 3-bedroom house in the Third Ring Road only cost a little more than 1 million yuan. This was the difference. But after buying the new house, she did not live alone. The girl living with her was Ai Xiaoxi. According to her, although it was impossible for her and Jiang Hai to be together, she had to help Jiang Hai keep an eye on Ai Xiaoxi. After Ai Xiaoxi changed the money in her bank card into RMB, she transferred 3 million yuan to her hometown to pay back her family's money to treat the illness of her brother and parents. The rest of the money was enough for her family to buy a big house in the county. After receiving the money, Ai Xiaoxi's family cried because they vaguely knew that Ai Xiaoxi's money didn't come from a legitimate source. In the end, it was Feng Yunshen who spoke up for Ai Xiaoxi, saying that she found a rich boyfriend and lent the money to her. But after saying this, Ai Xiaoxi's parents always wanted to see Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai went back, he made a big fuss. Of course, this was a story in the future. At least now, it was settled temporarily. In addition to these things, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen also had the intention to suppress the company. Feng Yunshen was not a kind person, and this time, she supported Ai Xiaoxi, which made her even more unfriendly. Especially the fat pig manager who originally had some feelings for Ai Xiaoxi. After knowing that Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen had found a big backer together, he became honest. At least on the surface, the people in the company did not dare to show off to them. As for the photos they took, in order to avoid Jiang Hai's jealousy, they were strictly covered up. But even so, the two's delicate faces caused a sensation on the internet. On a goddess website for otakus, Feng Yunshen, who was originally in the top 10, even rushed to the top 3. Ai Xiaoxi, with her young capital, also rushed to the top 3, and even took the first place for a few days. The two girls became a lot more popular in an instant. Sure enough, in the eyes of these otakus, 13 Grid Abroad was much better than in China. Especially the style they showed in the photos, it was really fascinating. Okay, Sister Chen, what do you want to drink? Hearing what Feng Yunshen said to her, Ai Xiaoxi also chuckled, then took her donkey brand bag and asked her with a chuckle. The bag in her hand was given to her by Jiang Hai. The donkey brand precious leather series, sold in China, is worth 350,000 renminbi. Sold abroad, this thing is also worth $30,000, nearly 200,000 renminbi. She has to admit that it is really expensive. But no matter where she goes with this bag, it is not an exaggeration to say that it is the center of attention. Those who are knowledgeable know that this thing is very expensive. Iced coffee. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan also smiled. She has to admit that AI Xiaoxi's attitude is really good. If she was a man, she would also like her. After saying a sentence, she started the engine and went to the underground parking lot. As for AI Xiaoxi, she walked into the office building in front of her. In the Starbucks on the first floor, she ordered 2 cups of coffee. While waiting, a figure came to her. Xiaoxi. Hearing someone call her from behind, AI Xiaoxi turned her head curiously. When she saw the person, her pupils couldn't help but tremble, but it only took a second to return to normal. It's you, what a coincidence. Looking at the man standing in front of her, AI Xiaoxi said very plainly. Coincidence? A coincidence is over. In order to see you, I have been waiting here for 3 days. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, the man's body couldn't help but tremble. Then, he said to AI Xiaoxi with a serious face. Oh, why are you looking for me in such a hurry? Hearing his words, AI Xiaoxi nodded and continued to ask. Listening to the conversation between strangers, the man really felt his heart bleeding. We have reached the point where I have to look for you for something? Looking at AI Xiaoxi in front of him, the man said with a trembling voice. It was hard for him to imagine that the woman in front of him was once his true love. No, you misunderstood me. What I mean is, don't look for me if you have something in the future. My boyfriend will not be happy if he knows. Looking at the man in front of her, AI Xiaoxi said very plainly. Snow. Flowers fluttered in the wind, the north wind whistled, heaven and earth, a vast expanse. Just as AI Xiaoxi's voice fell, the song playing in the shop next door happened to be playing. The man looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face was filled with disbelief, regret, and helplessness. Your boyfriend? Isn't I your boyfriend? You have other boyfriends? Looking at AI Xiaoxi in front of him, the man shouted crazily. Hearing his words, AI Xiaoxi looked at him very plainly. This man was called Yu Hongji. He was AI Xiaoxi's boyfriend in college. Of course, the two of them only held hands at most. Ever since her family got into trouble, this man didn't help her. Instead, he dragged her down. Since then, AI Xiaoxi actually no longer regarded him as her boyfriend. This didn't mean that AI Xiaoxi had to force this man to do anything for her. However, this man's family was in the capital. He had a house and a car. Although he wasn't very rich, he still had a few 100,000 yuan. When her family got into trouble, let alone a few 100,000 yuan, he didn't even take out 10,000 yuan. Even if she wanted to borrow money from his family, there was no way. According to Yu Hongji's mother, they weren't married yet. Why should she borrow money from him? Even if they were married, what obligation did they have to borrow money from him? Anyway, it meant that he didn't have any money. His money belonged to him. It had nothing to do with her. She understood this. However, a boyfriend who was unwilling to help her when she needed it the most, and who only wanted her to live according to his wishes, was better off not having him. Therefore, when she ignored this man's objection and entered this company, she had already called him and officially broke up with him. Now, seeing this man come looking for her again, AI Xiaoxi's heart, which had already been captured by Jiang Hai, didn't have the slightest ripple. Sorry, you can only be considered my ex-boyfriend now. Don't destroy the last bit of your existence in my heart. Thank you. Looking at Yu Hongji, who was about to go crazy, AI Xiaoxi's heart was very calm as she said faintly. Miss, your coffee is ready. At this moment, the waiter handed over 2 cups of packaged coffee. Thank you. After taking the coffee, AI Xiaoxi calmly walked out. However, Yu Hongji grabbed her arm. At this moment, Jiang Hai didn't have any informants in the capital. Naturally, he didn't know what was going on. At this moment, he was sitting on the sofa and looking at Bernice. Earlier at the dinner table, Bernice talked about Jiang Hai's cow and whether or not they needed to find an excuse. Jiang Hai also fell into deep thought. Originally, he thought that the oil futures he had in the United States would be the best amulet. After all, the real political forces in the United States were the major families and plutocrats. The most famous ones were the Rockefellers and the J.P. Morgan Chase. These plutocrats were very interested in oil. As long as someone threatened him, Zhang Hai could use these things to get through safely. However, he didn't think about what he would do if the people who were interested in his manor were the United States government. If other people were interested in Zhang Hai's manor, it was nothing more than wanting to own it. That way, the plutocrats would be able to use it. However, what if the United States government asked Zhang Hai to disclose the reason for raising the cow? What would Zhang Hai do? If Zhang Hai didn't agree to disclose the reason, they would force a team of experts to dissect Zhang Hai's cow. What would he do then? Or directly imprison Zhang Hai and watch him raise cattle, or torture him to extract a confession? What should he do? It wasn't that Zhang Hai's heart was too dark. When he heard Bernice's words, he couldn't help but gradually walk in the direction of darkness. Chapter 382. Ah, who is special, what should I do? Is it a dead knot? Patting his forehead, Zhang Hai looked at the chandelier on the ceiling and said with some speechlessness. In fact, it's quite easy to solve. You just have to announce how to raise cattle. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice, who was sitting next to him, glanced at him and said indifferently. It can be seen that she really doesn't care much about these things. In Bernice's view, if Zhang Hai really has any secret recipe, and if the UA government wants it, then it will be announced. But Zhang Hai listened to her words, and the expression on his face was like a secret. The problem is that it can't be announced. Looking at Bernice helplessly, Zhang Hai whispered in a low voice. If it's the same as your treatment method, it can't be announced, then you can find a way to divert attention. For example, you can set up a research lab yourself, and then study why your cattle mutated, don't you know that? When the time comes, if the higher-up sends someone to investigate, just let them investigate. You are so cooperative, they won't bother you for the sake of influence. Looking at Zhang Hai, who seemed to have a headache, Bernice speechlessly looked at him and said. This is what you said, the way to cure the root cause? Hearing her words, Zhang Hai was stunned at first, then his eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, if I don't say it all the time, those people will definitely think that I have some secret recipe, but if I don't tell them, it will be easy to mess up. But if I also make it clear and tell them that I don't know, and if anyone is interested, they can come and study it, then it will be easier. After all, the UA government still protects privacy on the surface. Now it's not that Zhang Hai doesn't want to disclose this secret recipe, but because Zhang Hai doesn't know it, then it's much easier. At least they are unlikely to deal with Zhang Hai in a tough way. This is also a cure, but it may be a little troublesome because a research institute is very expensive. Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Bernice still said calmly. She was only responsible for coming up with ideas. No, the cost of the research institute is not small, but this may also be a way to make money. After listening to her words, Zhang Hai shook his head. If it was about these crooked ideas, he might not be able to do it. But when it came to making money, Zhang Hai's brain turned very quickly. The biggest purpose of this research institute was to hide Zhang Hai's bulls and remove Zhang Hai himself. At that time, these people would at most discover that Zhang Hai's pasture was particularly good. That was all. No one would suspect Zhang Hai. However, in addition to getting himself out of trouble, Zhang Hai can also use this research institute to make money. For example, if there were tourists, they could visit the research institute. This was also a tourist attraction. Secondly, the research institute could also help him raise cattle more scientifically and distribute new cattle breeds. All in all, although this thing requires a lot of money, it is very beneficial to Zhang Hai. Do you know anyone who is involved in biology? Find someone to help me open a research institute. Looking at Bernice, Zhang Hai said seriously. Don't even think about the people I know. They are all researchers. Even if your cattle are expensive, they won't come because they will feel insulted. You can only choose the person you want. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. Indeed, if you ask a doctor who treats people to treat dogs, he will feel insulted. Even treating dogs is like this, let alone studying cattle. Even in the United States, cattle have a high status, but they won't attract people. By the way, where does Xanthi live? I will go and play with her tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai's sad face, Bernice said slowly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also casually said the location of Xanthi's house. You even know her house, it seems that you really have something going on. By the way, how did you meet Xanthi? Hearing that Jiang Hai could name Xanthi Clive's house number without even thinking about it, Bernice couldn't help but be a little curious. At first, it was because the town's elementary school collapsed due to heavy snow. Then I was also a member of Winthrop Town, so I donated some money. Then I officially met Xanthi. Then she heard that I had never been to Boston, so she took the initiative to be my guide, and then. By the way, I think I know where to find people who study cattle. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai also recalled and said. His meeting with Xanthi was really a bit dramatic. But halfway through, he suddenly smashed his fist. He remembered where to find people who study cattle. You know? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice looked at him strangely. I have to thank you for this. Patting her on the shoulder, Jiang Hai quickly ran upstairs to his room. He has to hurry up and check. If he remembers correctly, those researchers should be in Boston. Just as Jiang Hai was gratified in his heart and found a solution, the atmosphere in the coffee shop in the capital was a bit tense. Do you like money that much? For the sake of money, you sold your body and even your soul. Do you have any shame? I came to find you, and you said this? You smelly bitch, how could I be so blind to fall in love with a green tea like you? Seeing that Ai Xiaoxi was about to leave, Yu Hongji finally couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing his shout, not only the people in the coffee shop, but also the people who work here, all looked over. As for Ai Xiaoxi, the people here have actually heard about her. She is young, beautiful, and energetic. The people who work in this building usually have a good impression of her. Of course, this refers to the men. Men are the most loyal people in the world. From the age of 18 to the age of 80, they all like women in their early 20s. They are young, beautiful, and have a good figure. This will not change for the rest of their lives. Unlike women, who often change their minds, regardless of age, and like different people. It is not an exaggeration to say that a woman like Ai Xiaoxi is the public enemy here. Now that they see her make a fool of herself, the men here are very excited, and the women are also very excited. They can't wait to see her make a fool of herself. Feeling the eyes of the people around her, Ai Xiaoxi, who was still pretending to be calm, began to become anxious. You let go, I'm not your girlfriend anymore. I don't need you to care about my business. Looking at the man, Ai Xiaoxi said with disgust. She has long known that this man may come to pester her, but she didn't expect this guy to be so shameless. Yes, I don't need to care about you. There are plenty of people who will care about you. Whether they tell you to kneel, you don't dare to stand. Whether they tell you to use your mouth, you don't dare to use your hands. When you were with me, you pretended to be a saintess. You would hesitate for a long time just to hold my hand. Now, you've been out for less than 3 months, and you've become so arrogant. Are you willing to be a slave of those rich people? Do you want money? Come on, I have money too. How many times do you want? Come on. Seeing more and more people gathering, seeing Ai Xiaoxi struggling, Yu Hongji completely lost his mind and shouted loudly. You bastard! Go away! Feeling Yu Hongji's madness, Ai Xiaoxi stepped forward and stepped on Yu Hongji's foot. Although Yu Hongji was in great pain, he didn't let go of her. Instead, he raised his hand and slapped her. You bitch, how dare you step on me? I'll beat you to death. Just as the slap was about to land on AI Xiaoxi's face, a figure suddenly flashed from afar. When AI Xiaoxi opened her eyes, she found that Yu Hongji, who was still holding on to her, had been kicked far away. At this moment, there were two big men holding him down on both sides. No matter how crazy he was, it was difficult for him to move. Seeing this scene, AI Xiaoxi subconsciously took a step back. However, when she took a step back, someone pushed her, stopping her in her tracks. At the same time, she was startled. She turned around in surprise and found a woman who was about the same height as her, older than her, and very beautiful. She was wearing an office lady suit and had an extremely strong aura standing behind her. "You're AI Xiaoxi? Where's Feng Yunshan?" Seeing AI Xiaoxi's panicked gaze, the woman glanced at her indifferently. She didn't say any nonsense and directly asked her. Sister Chen. She didn't come. Do you need something from her?" Looking at this woman, AI Xiaoxi subconsciously lied. She felt that this woman's aura was really strong. She didn't know if Sister Chen had offended this person, but it seemed that if she had really offended this person, then it would be really troublesome. After all, she was a person who brought bodyguards with her when she went out. Xiaoxi. But unfortunately, sometimes people are so slow. As soon as her voice fell, Feng Yunshan had already run over. Just now, she had just parked the car and heard that there was a fight upstairs, and the opponent was AI Xiaoxi. She didn't have time to wait for the elevator, but directly took off her high heels and ran all the way up. But when she ran into the coffee shop, she was stunned, because she did know the woman standing in front of AI Xiaoxi. "Hello, we meet again. I heard that you went to Jiang Hai's place." "Oh, and her. It seems that you have made up your mind. Do you want to come and talk to me?" Turning her head, looking at Feng Yunshan, this woman with a strong aura said lightly. "Can I say no?" Looking at this woman, Feng Yunshan slowly put down the shoes inside. Although her words were still a little stiff and a little arrogant, it could be seen from her face that she had already accepted her fate, that she was already terrified. "Of course not. Come, pack your things. You go and tell their boss. Let's go, I'll treat you to beef. I think you must miss the taste, right?" With a chuckle, the woman waved her hand faintly. Then, someone beside her went upstairs. Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi looked at each other, put on their shoes, and followed her out. Chapter 383. The person who came to look for Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi was naturally no one else but Qi Li. After she left the office building with Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi, there was already a Rolls-Royce parked outside the door. This car was the same model as Jiang Hai's car in the United States. Even the color was the same. It was specially bought by Qi Li after she came back from the United States. After getting in the car, the three of them did not say a word in the car. They rushed to the place that Qi Li had booked. Looking at Qi Li sitting there, Feng Yunshan looked very calm on the surface, but in fact, her heart was already thumping. After all, in a sense, she was the mistress, and Qi Li was the main wife. When the mistress saw the main wife, there were not many who dared to be arrogant. As for AI Xiaoxi, from her face to her heart, she was quite uneasy. Sitting in the car, her 10 fingers were about to be twisted together. Looking at their performance, Qi Li saw it in her eyes and felt a little depressed in her heart. Now, she really wanted to go up, grab the hair of these two B*****s, and smash their heads together. Beating them up would not be enough to relieve her hatred. But the problem was that she knew that this was not possible. Otherwise, she would not be able to explain to Jiang Hai. Speaking of which, the relationship between Qi Li and Jiang Hai was really a bit complicated. It seemed that every time the plot could not progress, she would come out to save the scene. She was really a very selfless person. Of course, these were all digressions. In fact, when Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi went to Jiang Hai's manor, she already knew. because she had deliberately arranged an informant near Jiang Hai's manor. In fact, it was not quite right to call it an informant, because this informant's main responsibility was to protect this area. Yes, her informant was a police officer. Now that Jiang Hai had invested in Winthrop's tourism development, in the eyes of the Winthrop people, Jiang Hai was the most important person. Of course, in the past, he was also the most important taxpayer. Therefore, the police cars outside Jiang Hai's manor would come every few minutes. Even though the distance was far, it did not dissuade the government from protecting Jiang Hai's assets. At this time, Qi Li sent someone to ask the police to help watch Jiang Hai to see if there were any outsiders. It was understandable. Therefore, when Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi entered Jiang Hai's manor for the first time, she already knew about it. After that, she even hired a private investigator to take some photos back. However, after the photos were taken, she didn't know what to do next. Normally, if a wife caught her cheating husband, these photos would be the evidence. Even if she didn't divorce him, she would still give him a warning. But now, the relationship between Jiang Hai and Qi Li was a little subtle. If she wanted a divorce, Jiang Hai would be happy. If she wanted to warn Jiang Hai, it would be useless because Jiang Hai would be happy to divorce her. Even if he had to give her half of his manor, Jiang Hai wouldn't care. Because with his ability and wealth, he could build a new manor like this wherever he went after the divorce. Therefore, the relationship between Qi Li and Jiang Hai was getting more and more subtle. In fact, from the beginning, Qi Li didn't pay too much attention to Jiang Hai. Because in the beginning, Jiang Hai really seemed to be a little useless to her. The relationship between the two of them was just a relationship of money. But she didn't know when it started, but in her eyes, Jiang Hai, who didn't seem to be very capable, suddenly became like a star in the sky, shining brightly in an instant. Excellent men are extremely attractive to women. It's like you have a toy. When you don't play with it, you forget about it. But suddenly, there are a lot of people, even if they have to spend a lot of money to get the toy. You have no choice but to face it. In Qi Li's eyes, Jiang Hai may be that toy. After going to Jiang Hai's manor, Qi Li also had some interactions with him. Most importantly, she became more and more curious about Jiang Hai and found more and more good things about Jiang Hai. He was indifferent, which was a double-edged sword. In other people's eyes, he had no ambition, but in Qi Li's eyes, he was a very good harbor. However, even if his temperament was indifferent, his ability to make money was much stronger than his own. He didn't know about other things, but just the amount of money he had earned in the past few months was enough to catch up with the money his company had earned in the past few decades. He was rich, had a good temperament, and had a good figure. Most importantly, he dared to take responsibility and could give Qi Li an indescribable sense of security. She didn't know when Jiang Hai had become very manly, especially in the face of the mountain lion attack. That kind of sense of security could only be seen in her father's body when she was young. It was also because of that night that Qi Li's feelings for Jiang Hai gradually came. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she would think about him. Qi Li didn't know when Jiang Hai had become very manly. If she had faced this relationship earlier, would the ending have been different? If she were in Winthrop now and lived with Jiang Hai, would her life be very beautiful? Of course, these were just thoughts. It wasn't that easy. Now, in public, she and Jiang Hai were business partners. In private, she still had some inexplicable feelings for Jiang Hai. That was why she held back her anger and looked at the two love rivals in front of her. The car soon arrived at the destination. It was one of the restaurants Qi Li was renovating. After getting out of the car, Qi Li led them into the empty restaurant. Now that the restaurant's renovation was completed, the smell was still in the air. Although the ingredients were the best, it was always good to be careful. Therefore, she planned to dry it for another month before opening it. But now, the people in the restaurant were all ready and were getting used to their positions. Because the restaurant's main dish was Jiang Hai's beef, everything was built according to the requirements of a Western restaurant. At first glance, it made people feel that 13 spaces were very high. Under normal circumstances, this restaurant wouldn't serve ordinary customers. At least, people who weren't properly dressed wouldn't be allowed to enter. Of course, those who pretended to be weak were depressed. Seeing Qi Li's arrival, everyone in the restaurant was busy with their own business. However, when Qi Li passed by, they would respectfully bow to show their respect, but they wouldn't disturb her work. This was also Qi Li's request. She didn't need to do that. Well, her idea was different from Jiang Hai's and other people's. If she didn't do that, then what was the point of having the waiters bow? No matter what Qi Li thought, the three of them walked to a table in the middle of the hall. The steak in Qi Li's restaurant was cooked on the spot. In addition to steak, the restaurant also sold teppanyaki. Customers could gather here and watch the chef cook while they ate. She had to admit that it was very effective. When Qi Li walked over, a chef was already ready. Although they were eating teppanyaki, the chef wasn't a Japanese, but a French. Actually, teppanyaki was originally invented by the Spanish in the 15th or 16th century. At that time, Spain was the most powerful country in the world, and even the United Kingdom was inferior to it. This way of eating was invented by them, but it was indeed carried forward by the Japanese later. In terms of eating teppanyaki, European chefs were indeed not as good as Japanese chefs, but considering that the main dish here was steak, it was a good choice to hire a French chef. When he saw Qi Li and the others coming over, the handsome French chef who looked to be in his 30s showed a confident smile and said a string of French to the three women. Then, before the three women understood, he used his half-baked Chinese to translate. "Hello, ladies. My dear Qi, I've prepared everything. You can have a look at my skills." The French chef said while winking at Qi Li. Seeing this scene, Qi Li didn't react, but Feng Yunshan frowned slightly, but she didn't say anything. The three of them sat there. Next, it was time for the French chef to show off his skills. One had to admit that the French chef that Qi Li found was really good. He was a 2-star Michelin chef. As soon as the dishes were cooked, the aroma drifted over. Then, he divided the dishes into 3 portions and sent them to the 3 women by the waiter. However, the 3 portions didn't seem to be different from each other. Although the 3 portions looked different, those who had studied them would know that Lu Li's portion was the best. It was a pity that Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi didn't study it. They ate some of the teppanyaki and to be honest, the taste was good, but the ingredients were ordinary, especially after they ate at Jiang Hai's place. Fortunately, the steak at the back was from Jiang Hai's place. It was specially brought back by Qi Li. Now that they ate it, the taste was indeed quite good. Although it was morning, the 3 women ate with relish. As for the French chef, after he finished cooking, he didn't retreat to the kitchen. Instead, he stood there and looked at Qi Li with a pair of gentle eyes. Unfortunately, Qi Li didn't even bother to tease him. "We're almost done eating. If you have anything to say, just say it, or we'll have to go back to work." Seeing that there wasn't much beef left on the plate, Feng Yunshan finally mustered up the courage and said to Qi Li, "Words? Do you think my words are useful? If I told you to stay away from Jiang Hai, would you do it?" Qi Li picked up a piece of steak and slowly put it into her mouth, then said somewhat speechlessly, "Actually, this doesn't depend on us, it depends on him." Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan hesitated for a moment and said, "Yes, so today I just came over to treat you to a meal. Consider it as me, your first wife, taking advantage of you. But then again, Feng Yunshan, you can just go to Jiang Hai yourself. Why did you bring another one? Aren't you afraid that what you get will be divided?" Qi Li gently tapped the table with her finger and said with a faint smile. Hearing her words, Feng Yunshan also gently wiped the corner of her mouth and smiled. Chapter 384. Looking at Qi Li in front of her, Feng Yunshan was not in a hurry, and there was no need to panic now. After wiping her mouth, she deliberately took a sip of her drink and said slowly, "I have a congenital defect, so I can't be the last one to stand next to Jiang Hai, but if the last one to stand next to Jiang Hai is you, then I will be in a passive position, so I want to take advantage of this opportunity to get reinforcements, that's all. Besides, with Jiang Hai's financial resources and ability in that aspect, it is not a problem to satisfy the two of us. To be honest, I can't take it, I think you should understand. Listening to Feng Yunshan's words, even Qi Li's face turned red unconsciously. She didn't think of anything shameful, but because. Although she and Jiang Hai were husband and wife in name, they didn't do that kind of thing. Now listening to the mistress talking about this in front of her, she was really embarrassed and anxious. Looking at her appearance, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi naturally didn't think about it, but they thought that she would be shy. Forget it, I can't talk to you. Before the matter between me and Jiang Hai is resolved, I will protect your safety in the capital. Remember, you are safe now because of Jiang Hai. If one day Jiang Hai also abandons you, then you don't need to stay here anymore. Shaking her head, Qi Li shook the thoughts in her mind and said faintly. Of course, we are also very clear about this, so I even abandoned the big boss behind me. That's sincere enough, right? Xiaoxi, let's go, it's time to go to work. Hearing Qi Li's words, Feng Yunshan also stood up and walked out with a smile. She knew that when she reached Qi Li's level, she would do what she said. If she said that she and Ai Xiaoxi were safe, then they were really safe. Of course, the premise was that they didn't seek death and do something to make Jiang Hai unhappy. At that time, no one could save them. With Qi Li's character, the possibility of adding insult to injury was almost 1,000%. Seeing that Feng Yunshan was about to leave, Ai Xiaoxi also stood up immediately, nodded to Qi Li, and left immediately. After all, she was a person who just walked out of school, and looking at Qi Li, she was the most stressed. Looking at the two leaving, Qi Li didn't move, but continued to sit there and drink. Oh, by the way, let me remind you, Jiang Hai is very narrow-minded and sensitive. For people like us who are destined to be unable to stand by his side, he will remind us to be careful. You are the legal wife, so naturally, you should also pay attention to the little bees around you. If one day you get shot, then you and Jiang Hai are completely finished. Seeing that Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi were about to walk out of the restaurant, Feng Yunshan suddenly stopped and looked at the chef with some ridicule. After saying something to Qi Li, she turned around and left. Although they didn't know how to judge whether the teppanyaki meat was good or not, they weren't blind. But they were not blind. That man had been staring at Qi Li just now. Not to mention that it was just a feeling of admiration for the boss, they would not believe it. How could a Frenchman be any good? Hearing what Feng Yunshan said, Qi Li drank the drink in front of her in one gulp. Now she really wanted to find a man to anger Jiang Hai. But just like what Feng Yunshan said, Jiang Hai was a sensitive and narrow-minded person. If he knew that she found a boyfriend, no matter if this boyfriend was real or fake, he would directly cut off contact with her. He was such a heartless person, so Qi Li could only tolerate him outside while managing herself. But fortunately, she was not as helpless and cold as before. Because she knew that if something happened to her, she could rely on the shoulder in the United States. So after Feng Yunshan finished speaking, she looked at the person in front of her. You are fired. After saying this to the handsome French guy, Qi Li got up and left. Me? Outside? Hearing Qi Li's words, the handsome French guy, who originally felt good and wanted to hug the beauty, instantly became Spartan. He came here to work, first, because the money here was really a lot, and second, it was for Qi Li. She was rich, beautiful, had a good figure, and was also a strong woman. If such a woman was in his hands, even if he didn't get married, he wouldn't have to work for a lifetime. But he didn't expect that because of a light sentence, he would lose his job. Qi Li was too lazy to explain anything to him. She directly said, because my husband doesn't like it. Then she turned and left. Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi had to go to work, and she also had to go to work. The Qi family was still the most important in her heart. After a busy day, the imperial capital slowly went into the evening, and on the other side of the world in the United States, it was already morning. When Jiang Hai stretched and got out of bed, it was already past 7 o'clock. He got up and went to the bathroom to wash his face and brush his teeth, then he changed into sportswear and went out for a run. However, when Jiang Hai went out, he found that Bernice had already woken up. At this time, she was wearing a white traditional Chinese practice suit. She was standing there practicing boxing, but it was different from the Tai Chi that Jiang Hai had seen in the past. The old man and old woman in the park who practiced Tai Chi was not the same. This woman's boxing was vigorous and vigorous. Seeing that she was still punching hard, Jiang Hai didn't say much, but started running directly. Half an hour later, when Jiang Hai came back, the woman had already finished playing. At this time, she was relaxing her muscles. "Finished, your punching technique is really beautiful." Seeing Bernice, Jiang Hai said with a smile. "This was taught to me by my mother. Well, an uncle. This is authentic Bajiquan, but I have never used this thing in a real fight. It is probably just for show." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice shook her head and said with a serious face. "Bajiquan? I have heard of this before. In literature, there is Tai Chi to calm the world, and in martial arts, there is Bajiquan to shake the world. This is Bajiquan, it is really good." Although Jiang Hai is not a boxing enthusiast, when he learned fighting skills from Bell, he went online. He had also looked it up on the internet. In terms of attack power, the Ba Ji Kung Fu should be at the top, followed by the Xingyi Kung Fu, the 5 forms, and the 8 trigrams. Of course, there was no such thing as the strongest martial arts in the world, only the strongest person. What kind of person uses what kind of Kung Fu, and what kind of effect it has, is uncertain. Jiang Hai is a layman, so he won't comment. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice glanced at him and said, "Have you finished your work at the Research Institute? Are you in a good mood?" "Well, there is some progress. After breakfast, I will go there." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded, and his mood became better for no reason. Indeed, he has the right to be happy because his biggest crisis has been solved. Oh. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to have found a way, Bernice didn't care. After chatting for a while, the two returned to their respective rooms and took a shower. After washing off the sweat on his body, Jiang Hai went downstairs and began to prepare breakfast. It has to be said that life is always the best teacher. Thinking back, Jiang Hai didn't even know if the noodles were cooked, let alone cooking, but now in order not to trouble others, he has gradually begun to cook. Of course, Delina and Marion weren't young anymore. These two girls would sometimes cook, but to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't know if these two girls had a problem with their taste buds, but they especially liked to eat sour and spicy food. When cooking, they would also use a lot of ketchup and chili. This was what made Jiang Hai speechless. It was fine to eat them once in a while, but he couldn't bear to eat them every day. Therefore, as long as he had time, Jiang Hai would come to cook. Of course, cleaning up was their job. Jiang Hai didn't eat something as greasy as steak in the morning. Of course, there was still beef sausages. These beef sausages were made by Mrs. Philemon in the manor. Generally speaking, after removing the main beef, there would be a lot of minced meat left, such as the neck and some connecting parts of the meat. Although this beef could reach the standard if sold outside, Jiang Hai really didn't want to eat beef of this grade. They couldn't even finish the best beef, so what was the point of eating this beef? Therefore, these beef sausages were made into beef sausages. Generally speaking, beef sausages wouldn't be made with the lowest grade of beef that was canned. But it was also mainstream to use minced beef. It was good enough to use usable beef. It was really a waste to use standard beef sausages. But to be honest, it tasted pretty good. He fried 4 sausages, 4 eggs, cooked oatmeal, and a bowl of fruit and vegetable salad. As for milk and coffee, Jiang Hai had them all. He didn't drink coffee, so his coffee was canned. Although it wasn't as good as freshly made coffee, it was at least better than instant coffee. The four of them ate a delicious breakfast together and rested for a while. It was already past 9 in the morning. Bernice also had a driver's license, so Jiang Hai gave her the key to his Ford E350 and told her to do as she saw fit. Then, he drove his battle shield towards the distant Boston. A strange man. Looking at Jiang Hai's car driving away, Bernice couldn't help but curl her lips. In fact, she had another identity that Jiang Hai didn't know. She came here this time to observe Jiang Hai. But from yesterday afternoon and evening, this Jiang Hai was really quite interesting, but she didn't know what would happen in the future. Watching Jiang Hai's car leave her sight, Bernice didn't say much. She took the key and started the engine. She drove in the direction of the town. Today, she was going to see one of her few friends, Shandy Clive. As for Jiang Hai, he drove all the way to Boston. He didn't stop after passing through the city, but went directly to Boston University. This time, the researcher he was looking for was at Boston University. Chapter 385. The grass was green, and the trees were green. Well, Jiang Hai himself was not a top student, nor was he a scholar. In his mind, it was difficult to think of too many words to describe the scene he saw in the school at this time. Huaxia had a long history. With 5,000 years of history, there were many poems to describe these scenes. But for Jiang Hai, when it came to spring, the only phrase he could think of was, "How much worry can a gentleman have?" Just like a group of eunuchs, forget about it. After going to school for so many years, Jiang Hai had already returned everything he learned to the teacher. He did not like to owe people anything. But when it came to ancient poems, the one he remembered the most was Li Bai's poem about the moon. It was the bright moonlight before the bed, suspected of being frost on the ground. Raising my head to forget the moon, lowering my head to think of home. When he was young, Jiang Hai always thought that this poem was about homesickness. Later, he found out that it was not. The poem should be explained like this. In front of the bed, there was a woman named Mingyu. She took off all her clothes. Her snow-white skin was like the frost of the 12th lunar month. Raising his head to look at the girl named Mingyu, lowering his head to think of his wife in his hometown. The main concept of this poem was about Li Bai's feelings when he was looking for a prostitute. Was this also considered helping the country? But in any case, the feeling of youth on B City University's campus was very good. After parking the car in the designated parking lot, Jiang Hai strolled into the school. The education in the United States was similar to that of Huaxia. It could be said that Huaxia learned from the United States, including the steering wheel on the left and the right. The school system and start time were the same as the United States. Most schools in the United States had 2 semesters. Of course, some schools had 3 semesters. School starts in January, May, and August. But if it was 2 semesters, then there was no May. There were only August and January, and the start of school was in August. Now Jiang Hai was hanging around here, and before he knew it, it was already June. June was also the time of graduation, and the flow of people in the school was also increasing. The students who were good at their studies were busy preparing for their final graduation thesis. The students who were not good at their studies were thinking about what kind of job they could find after entering society. This was because the American government had very lax employment conditions. Well, actually, the employment rate was not as high as Huaxia. Of course, the reason why they could not find a job was because of themselves. This was because there were many jobs that they were not willing to do, such as courier, waiters, and even civil servants. In the United States, most of the capable people would work in those big companies, and these companies were all private enterprises. The idea of an iron rice bowl in China did not have many people in the United States. This was something that could not be helped. Different education methods would naturally lead to different people's thinking. Jiang Hai looked at the lucky students around him and couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that he was indeed old. Unknowingly, he also wandered here for more than half an hour. Only then did he remember that he was looking for someone. Classmate, may I ask, where is ecological evolution? Looking at the students around him, most of them were white, a small number of black people, but they were basically in groups. Jiang Hai finally found an Asian girl who was alone. He pulled her and asked her. After the girl stopped, she looked up blankly. When she saw Jiang Hai, she couldn't help but stare blankly. It's you, why are you here? Looking at Jiang Hai, the girl said with a little joy. Do we know each other? Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't remember knowing this girl. It's me. My name is Lu Qing. When you bought the car, I sold it to you. Seeing Jiang Hai's puzzled look, the girl couldn't help but say with a smile. For Jiang Hai, this girl was just a shopping guide, but for this girl, Jiang Hai was her biggest customer. Because of her relationship with Jiang Hai, her monthly commission was enough for her expenses during her study abroad. Oh, it's you, aren't you from Harvard University? Why are you at Boston University? Hearing Lu Qing's words, Jiang Hai scratched his head puzzledly. His memory was still good. After all, his physical fitness was twice as good. When he said the girl's name, Jiang Hai's mind automatically reflected the situation at the time. The girl did introduce herself, and Jiang Hai was shocked at that time. Our Harvard University and Boston College are jointly conducting an experiment. It's about the bicorn gene. My graduation thesis is also about this. The main site is here, so I come here every day to do the experiment. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lu Qing said with a smile. Obviously, in Boston, although there are many Asian students, and they are also very good at studying. But the locals still have some rejection of them, which can be seen from her coming to school alone. Well, congratulations to you, study hard, and you can also do construction for China when you return to China in the future. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also laughed, patted her on the shoulder, and said with approval. Then why don't you return to China? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lu Qing looked at him with some doubts. I'm a cattle breeder. China doesn't need me. By the way, can I ask you, where is ecological evolution? If it is not necessary, Jiang Hai will not transfer his career to China. Although the taxes in China were much cheaper than in the United States, there were two problems. The first was that China was developing rapidly and the problem of the environment. Jiang Hai's main upgrade point was the tattoo on his body. If he returned to China, the tattoo's upgrade speed would be slower. This was not worth the loss. The second problem was that although the taxes in the United States were much higher, the problem was that his manor was still his. But in China, all the land belongs to the country. Jiang Hai worked hard to raise the cattle, fish, and land. When the country takes a fancy to it, it will directly belong to the country. If they compensate him with a little money, he won't even be able to find a reason to cry. This is the reality. Ecological evolution? What are you doing here? Hearing Jiang Hai change the topic, Lu Qing didn't ask much, but looked at him curiously. She is really confused. Why is Jiang Hai looking for ecological evolution? Don't I raise cattle? I want to set up a research team to study why my cattle are so good. With a shrug, Jiang Hai didn't know how to explain it. Saying it like this is a bit shameless. Hee hee. After listening to Jiang Hai's words, Lu Qing couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. It was the first time she saw someone so shameless. No matter what you want to do, come with me. Our research lab is in ecological evolution. But no matter what Jiang Hai said, Lu Qing still took him to the university. Because ecological evolution needs to study animals, not only cows, monkeys, orangutans, felines, canines, murines, and so on, they all need to study, so it takes up a lot of space. In a relatively remote area of Boston University, a place like a small zoo was built. This is where the research institute is located. As soon as Jiang Hai walked in front, he heard sounds coming from the research institute. After walking into the research institute with Lu Qing, Jiang Hai saw a lot of animals, really a lot. At first, it was the herbivore area. Rabbits, sheep, cows, horses, donkeys, and so on were all here. There was also the fake bison that Jiang Hai saw when he was at the Massachusetts grazing exhibition. According to Lu Qing, this bison was one of the fruits of Boston University's Research Institute, but the effect was not particularly good. The grandfather of this bison was a wild bison, but the grandmother, and grandfather were all normal and gentle cattle. After the crossbreeding, the female parent was an Angus cattle. Maybe it was because it was too gentle. So this bison's brain had some problems. It was commonly known as stupidity. It would do whatever you told it to do, but the premise was that you had to bring it to do it. They didn't have any instincts, and they didn't know how to move in groups. They were more like a machine than a living creature. Because of this kind of bison only looked good on the outside, but it didn't have any economic value in itself. If it was promoted, a cowboy would be responsible for a bison. How high would the cost be? Even Jiang Hai couldn't afford it, but Jiang Hai was quite interested in this kind of bison. It was big enough and docile enough. As long as this biological instinct was stimulated, it might be a good breeding target. Of course, these were just Jiang Hai's thoughts. Now was not the time for him to expand the breeding scale. After the vegetarian animal area, it was the omnivorous animal area. Monkeys, orangutans, bears, wild boars, and so on lived here. These animals ate both meat and vegetables. However, compared to the animals in the first area, the animals here were much more chaotic. As soon as they saw Jiang Hai and the others coming, they began to run around, jump, and ask for food. It had to be admitted that in fact, omnivorous animals were smarter than herbivores and pure carnivores. After the omnivore area, it was the carnivore area. Jiang Hai really found a lot of things here. In addition to the animals that L.V. Qing introduced to him at the beginning, there were many animals, such as crocodiles, pythons, coyotes, foxes, and so on. Jiang Hai even found mountain lions and black panthers, but there were no serious tigers and lions. When these animals saw Jiang Hai and L.V. Qing coming in, most of them stood up and circled around the cage. This represented their anxiety. It was obvious that they were quite unhappy to be locked in this small place. Chapter 386. After passing through the carnivore area, they arrived at the center of the research institute. After disinfection, Jiang Hai followed L.V. Qing to the door of the laboratory. Looking outside the door, he found that a lot of people were doing research there. Some were doing dissection, some were adjusting some potions. It seems that they were really busy. Standing outside the door, Jiang Hai looked inside. To his surprise, the people he saw in Massachusetts that day were not here. Did he come to the wrong place? Jiang Hai looked inside and was surprised to see that the people he saw in Massachusetts that day were not here. It's only been less than half a year, and everyone has left? Wait here for a while, I'll go in and see if Professor Gerard is here. Looking at the busy people inside, L.V. Qing couldn't directly take Jiang Hai into the laboratory. This place is not a place for people to enter. Of course, some people don't want to go in. After all, it is also a place for killing. Ordinary people will be somewhat disgusted by these things. Okay, thank you. Hearing L.V. Qing's words, Jiang Hai also nodded, then walked into the examination room. But she looked around and found that not only the professor was not there, but the associate professor was also not there. Just as she was about to come out and talk to Jiang Hai, a large group of people suddenly came in from outside. The old man in the lead, Jiang Hai has some impression of him. He is the old man who led the team in the past. But looking at their gloomy faces, Jiang Hai couldn't help but slow down. And these people also ignored Jiang Hai and walked straight into the laboratory. Seeing these people coming in, everyone, including L.V. Qing, temporarily stopped their work and looked at the people in front of them with a serious face. Students, I have to tell you some unfortunate news. Because the Cartwright Company has not been doing well recently, they are not going to invest in our experiments anymore, and there is no one to take over, so the school leaders have decided to temporarily suspend our research. From tomorrow onwards, you don't have to come here. Looking at the students looking at him, the old man that Jiang Hai saw waved his hand, then said with a sad face. Hearing his words, all the students exploded in an instant. How can this be? We are working so hard, how can we just stop? Professor, don't you want to fight for it? Our research results will have a chance to make a breakthrough. The old man and the other old man behind him couldn't help but sigh as they looked at the students in front of them. How could they not fight for it? But B City University is not a world-renowned university. If this experiment is conducted at Harvard, then it will not be stopped so quickly. Harvard can provide a certain amount of funds until they find another sponsor, but B City University does not have that much money. Therefore, once their funds were cut off, they would immediately call for a halt. That was the reality. At the same time, Harvard didn't have any interest in this subject, so they naturally wouldn't take it over easily. It was precisely because of this reason that the higher-ups of both sides discussed and decided to stop if there was no other way. All of a sudden, everyone present was in a bad mood, especially the professor over there. Actually, he was the one who felt the most upset when the project was stopped. Who knew when the school would approve the next project? Just when the crowd was excited and the professor was a little sad, LV Qing quietly came to his side. After saying a few words to him, she led him outside and came in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai, this is Mr. Baker Gerard, the professor and vice dean of ecological evolution at B City University. He is also the main person in charge of this laboratory. Mr. Gerard, this is Mr. Jiang Hai. He came to ask you to do a small project. Seeing the two meet, LV Qing introduced them to each other. After all, Jiang Hai helped her, so she still helped Jiang Hai with all her heart. Sir, I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. Our laboratory has encountered some difficulties recently, so we may not be in the mood to accept private work. Sorry. Looking at Jiang Hai, LV Qing naturally explained Jiang Hai's intentions, but the professor didn't have the time to prove why Jiang Hai was so good. After all, Jiang Hai came to give them money, so he politely refused Jiang Hai's project and then wanted to go back directly. This kind of researcher, whether at home or abroad, is not a person to be trifled with. They don't care too much about whether the other party will lose face or not. They are very direct. However, Jiang Hai liked this kind of direct person. This was because he felt that his emotional injury wasn't high. Those who were too scheming, he couldn't play with them. This kind of straightforward person was the kind of friend he liked to make the most. Sir, my work is not a small one. I just heard that your laboratory has some minor problems because of funding problems. I think I can help solve this problem. Seeing that this person was about to leave, Jiang Hai immediately stopped him and said, Huh? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, this person's eyes lit up. Now, this person wants to hear the word money most. Now that he heard that Jiang Hai can solve his biggest problem, he suddenly became energetic. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Jiang Hai. LV Qing has just explained that I am from Winthrop. I also own a manor. We met at the Massachusetts Livestock Exhibition before, but at that time, the Cartwright Company invested in your experiment, so the relationship between us is not very good. Looking at the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Oh, it's you, the owner of the miracle beef. How did you raise the cattle so well? It's even better than the Japanese cattle. It's incredible. After listening to Jiang Hai's words, it was obvious that this person had also heard of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai's beef cattle were in the limelight at the New York Beef Cattle Exhibition. He was also a person in the circle. How could he not have heard of it? However, after hearing that this person was in the limelight, he disappeared for a while and no one knew what he was doing. It's me. This time, I came here to let our laboratory study why my cattle are so good, because I also want to know. Looking at this person's surprised eyes, Jiang Hai also smiled. A person's name is like a tree's shadow. He didn't expect that one day he would become a celebrity. This feeling is really cool. Although I really want to study it, it's a pity that our laboratory is about to close down. You heard it just now. Because you defeated the Carlot Company, the company's liquidity was affected. At the beginning of May, they announced that they would stop investing at the end of May. Today, the official news came. The school has decided to stop our experiment, so we can't do anything about it. He sighed helplessly. A scientist like him naturally liked to explore those mysterious places the most. Why is Jiang Hai's beef so good? In fact, he also wants to know, but now they are not qualified. It doesn't matter, because I'm also very interested in your original research. That tame bison is indeed a good project. I don't know how much money this investment will cost, but if it's possible, I can help you solve it. As soon as he heard this, Jiang Hai knew that there was a way. The only thing the old man was worried about now was money. As for Jiang Hai, he had a backup plan. This was the problem of his backup plan. He had to leave his backup plan behind, so he didn't care about the investment of money. As long as it didn't directly ask for all of his wealth, there was no problem. Besides, these people could use his manor for free for their research. Jiang Hai felt that the gentle bison alone was quite interesting. However, Jiang Hai didn't make a promise. At the moment, he still had more than $700 million in cash. Not counting the $400 million in oil, he had earned more than $300 million in Miami. After returning, he sold the cattle for the first time and made more than $200 million. Plus, he made more than $300 million the second time. However, after deducting the $250 million he needed to invest in the town, he still had to spend. In total, he was afraid that he still had about $700 million in his black card. In fact, money was sometimes very valuable, such as when Jiang Hai was poor, but sometimes it wasn't, such as now. Jiang Hai didn't invest in stocks, real estate, or gambling, although the money would depreciate if it was kept in the bank. But it was still $700 million in cash, and he could withdraw it at any time. It could be said that Jiang Hai was definitely one of the people with the most cash on hand. Even Bill Gates might not have as much cash as he did. But what if the old man asked for billions? What would Jiang Hai do? So, he couldn't be too sure. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the old man's eyes couldn't help but light up. In fact, the cost of our research is not particularly large. If you have a group behind you, then money should not be a problem, but if it's just you, then it may be a little troublesome. According to the original investment amount of Cartwright Company, it's about $50 million a year, 60% of which can be used to offset taxes. Looking at Jiang Hai, the old man immediately said excitedly. As he spoke, he looked at Jiang Hai eagerly, afraid that Jiang Hai wouldn't agree. After hearing the old man say $50 million a year, Jiang Hai was relieved. $50 million wasn't a lot, especially when 60% could be used to offset taxes. Jiang Hai would only have to spend $20 million a year to buy a backup plan. If he had just come to the United States, to be honest, he might not have agreed to this price. It was too much, $50 million. But it didn't matter now. Based on the current sales, he would have to pay $600 to $700 million in taxes next year alone. Now that he could offset 60% of it, it was a good thing. I can invest, fully invest, and I can even raise the stakes. I can invest $100 million a year, but you have to come up with some projects worth investing in within 2 years. Looking at the old man in front of him, Jiang Hai calculated. $100 million could offset $60 million in taxes. Although it wasn't a lot, it wasn't a small amount either. Spending $40 million to buy a backup plan, and most importantly, there were other projects. Jiang Hai felt that he had made a profit this time. Deal. After all, the old man in front of him wasn't a businessman. When he heard Jiang Hai offer 100 million, he immediately clapped his hands and agreed without hesitation. Chapter 387. What happened next was much simpler. The two of them went to the office of the principal of B City University. Jiang Hai explained the amount of investment and transferred 100 million yuan on the spot. The principal of B City University did not treat Jiang Hai as a god and kept recommending other projects to Jiang Hai. However, Jiang Hai had no interest in these projects. In the end, the principal did not take out a penny from Jiang Hai's pocket, but the coach named Baker Gerard was overjoyed. Once Jiang Hai's money was in place, the experiment could continue. At the same time, he also gave Jiang Hai a thick stack of biological reports. Among them were not only the domesticated bison that Jiang Hai had seen before. There were also many reports on the domestication of other creatures. The most effective ones were the omnivorous animals, such as bears and wild boars. Their wildness had almost fallen to the acceptable range for humans. They were almost like some more ferocious dogs. At least they could recognize people. The domestication of carnivores, including mountain lions, black panthers, crocodiles, pythons, and so on, was not very ideal. Because they did not have spiritual energy, it was almost impossible to erase the ferocity of these carnivores in their DNA. Even if they were raised from a young age, as long as they were exposed to nature and blood, the ferocity engraved in their DNA would erupt. However, in addition to the carnivores and omnivores, the vegetarian animals were not bad. In addition to the domesticated bison, they also domesticated wild horses and many deer. In addition, there was also a very cute and docile animal, the capybara. The capybara was not a blowfish. The blowfish was a fish. The capybara was a large rodent and the largest rodent in the world. It belonged to the same genus as the Dutch pig, the guinea pig family. This animal originally lived in South America. It was about half a meter tall at the shoulder and weighed between 1 meter and 1 meter. It was quite cumbersome, but it had a very good temper. In South America, this kind of creature lived in the swamps, just like the domestic pigs in China. There were quite a few of them. Most importantly, their temperament was so gentle that it made one's hair stand on end. It was said that rabbits would bite when they were anxious. However, these creatures were almost never anxious. They could be bullied however they wanted. Hence, they were also one of the childhood playmates of the children in South America. The American government had always been determined to improve the diet of their citizens. The food that Americans ate was really too simple. This was because Americans almost never ate pork. They only ate beef, seafood, chicken, and even mutton. Therefore, the introduction of guinea pigs was beneficial to them. However, there was a huge difference between North America and South America. It was cold in North America. Of course, it didn't matter in Florida. They could just come over and live there. However, it was different in Boston. The research institute's most mature research system was to let these guinea pigs adapt to the climate in Boston. After Jiang Hai heard their report, he specially went to take a look. He had to admit that the guinea pigs were very good-looking and cute. Seeing that Jiang Hai was interested in this kind of thing, Baker Gerard was not completely ignorant. He immediately took out 2 freshly weaned capybaras that had not been tested yet. They were very clean and had just been weaned, and they gave them to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai did not refuse. These 2 little guys could be taken back to play with. After putting them in the box, Jiang Hai took them away. Of course, the matter of Jiang Hai's manor had been officially put on the agenda. They would send someone to check it out in the next few days to see why Jiang Hai's cows were so good. Driving with the 2 little guys, Jiang Hai returned to the manor. Of course, on the way back, he also gave the 2 little guys some spiritual energy, 1 for each. Jiang Hai was afraid that the 2 little guys would explode and die. After receiving the spiritual energy, the 2 little guys were still a little dizzy and sleepy. Their cute appearance made even Jiang Hai, who saw wild animals, his first thought was to eat them. He couldn't help but feel a little cute. He deliberately drove slowly. When he drove to the outskirts of Boston, he deliberately went to Zhang Dihai's shop. Sure enough, no matter when he came, he would see the old man sitting there, basking in the sun and drinking tea. It had to be admitted that Jiang Hai actually liked this kind of life the most, so people who were familiar with him would congratulate him in advance for entering the aging world. After freeloading 2 bottles of Lao Ganma from Mr. Zhang's shop, Jiang Hai discussed with him again. According to Mr. Zhang, the slaughtering date of the 3rd batch of cows should be set according to Walmart's time. Jiang Hai did not say much. Since the slightly awkward meeting with Pra Walton last time, Jiang Hai was really embarrassed about Walmart now. After staying here for 2 hours, after feeling that the 2 little guys were about to wake up, Jiang Hai took the initiative to leave and drove back to the manor. The moment his car stopped, Daliana, Marian, Xiaobai, Little Huang, Chirp, and Dai Teeth ran over together. Maybe they heard the dog barking. The 2 little guys, who were still a little confused, opened their bean-sized eyes and looked around curiously. When they saw Jiang Hai, the 2 little guys seemed to be relieved. It seems to have worked. Looking at the 2 little guys, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile, then he carried them out of the car. As soon as Jiang Hai got out of the car, these guys also surrounded him, looking at the 2 little guys in the cardboard box curiously. Wow, so cute. Girls have no resistance to cute things. As soon as Daliana and Marian saw the 2 little guys, they exclaimed and even stretched out their hands to tease them. Although they felt that these animals around them had the same smell of Jiang Hai's aura as they did, the 2 little guys were too docile. Facing Daliana's fingers, they didn't dodge, and they deliberately took the initiative to move forward. This action instantly won the favor of Dalina and Marian as they each carried one of them out of the room. Little Huang, Xiaobai, Dai Teeth, and Chirp also looked at the 2 little guys curiously. Because with their brain capacity, they have never seen such creatures before. What kind of joke is this? These are capybaras, they will be your good friends in the future. It's best to build a nest for them near the swimming pool, because they have to live by the water. By the way, these 2 little guys haven't been named yet. What should we name them? Jiang Hai stroked Daliana and Marian's hair and said with a smile. The 2 girls looked at the little guy in front of them, who was looking around with his bean-sized eyes. Thinking about it, Little Yellow, Little White, Bucktooth, and Chirps were all Jiang Hai's pets. And these 2 little fellows were their real pets, so they really cherished them. I think these 2 little guys look so silly. Why don't we call them Big 2 and Small 2? Looking at the names that Daliana and Marian couldn't decide for a while, Jiang Hai showed off his naming talent again, but as soon as he said it, the 2 girls frowned. Big 2, Small 2, are these even names? Stop joking, okay? But because it's Jiang Hai, they can't say anything to refute his words, so they can only be angry there. Okay, don't show off your poor naming skills, let these 2 children name themselves. Maybe she felt the noise outside. Bernice, who had just returned, came out with a smile. She couldn't help but laugh when she heard the names Jiang Hai gave them. Is the name I gave bad? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai scratched his head and asked with some confusion. Okay. I won't comment on your squirrel and bald eagle. Squirrel at least has Dai Teeth, and bald eagle's cry is chirp chirp, but your dog should be the green wolf of Tibetan Mastiff. It's green all over. Where did the yellow come from? Why is it called Little Huang? Your Caucasian is pure black. I don't see a little white. Why is it called Xiaobai? Pointing to Jiang Hai's 2 big dogs, Bernice actually wanted to ask when she came here. She was really curious. It's because of Big Yellow. Big Yellow. Dogs should be called Big Yellow. When we first came here, it was quite skinny. Naturally, it was called Little Yellow. As for Little White, haven't you seen Crayon Shin-chan? Dogs should be called Big Yellow and Xiaobai. Hearing Bernice's words, Jiang Hai said with certainty, and hearing his words, if it wasn't because she is not very familiar with him, Bernice would have cursed. Okay, but these two little guys, you don't have to intervene too much. If you have nothing else to do, come and help me arrange the room, your patient will come tomorrow. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice felt that it was impossible to reason with him, so she asked him to come over and help. Jiang Hai listened to her, climbed upstairs, and began to help her arrange the room. He has to admit that Bernice is really attentive to this patient. Everything in the room is sterilized, including the room itself, sheets, trouser covers, curtains, wardrobes, and even the mattress and floor have been sterilized. Although it can't be compared with a real sterile room, it is definitely the cleanest room in the house. At the same time, the whole room is decorated in white, but the curtains are the thickest to block the sunlight. This is also a necessary scene for albinos, because they can't stand direct sunlight, but they like bright colors. After all, humans yearn for the light, and no one wants to live in the dark. When the white inner room lights are turned on, it is indeed much brighter than the outside. Just look at Bernice's research institute and you will understand. After helping her deal with the room here, it was already night, but today, Jiang Hai doesn't need to cook. There is plenty of beef at home, and when he came back, he had already called Ai Dehua and asked him to bring him a fish when he came back. This is not a problem for Jiang Hai, he has plenty of fish in his fishery. When Ai Dehua came back, he brought him a big cod. This kind of Atlantic cod was originally the most important for Jiang Hai's cultivation, but later, Jiang Hai replaced the less expensive cod with American redfish. Although it is more difficult to raise, Jiang Hai is confident. Chapter 388. Although they didn't raise cod, there was no shortage of cod in the Atlantic Ocean. He could catch them at any time. Coupled with the nourishment of the seaweed aura in the Jiang Sea, the fish in his fishery, although not overflowing with fish, were quite numerous in number and variety. In addition to the aquaculture area and the coral area, some other places also had a lot of fish species. The resources were quite rich. According to Edward Anderson's estimation when he went out to the sea to feed the bait these days, all the fish in Jiang Hai's fish farm were worth about $100 million. Of course, this was including the fish in the coral area. Even so, it gave them a lot of confidence. After all, these fish had only been raised for a season. After raising them for another 3 seasons to make up a year, the size and price of the fish would definitely increase again. In the evening, Jiang Hai made fried beef and fried cod. Although it was still a matter of craftsmanship, the good ingredients were still delicious. Bernice kept nodding. Among other things, Jiang Hai's food was definitely the best. The next morning, after Jiang Hai and Bernice finished their exercise, the two left together in Jiang Hai's Rolls-Royce. According to Jiang Hai, they had to use this car to pick up people. Regarding this, Bernice just smiled and didn't say anything. Who had ever seen a car like this that required the owner to drive it himself? Generally speaking, buying this kind of car required a driver. Was the owner the driver? She had never heard of such a thing. However, Jiang Hai himself was a collection of contradictions, so it didn't matter. The two drove and soon arrived at the Boston airport. After parking the car, about half an hour later, the plane they were waiting for from Miami landed at Boston airport. After waiting for about half an hour, a girl walked out of the airport, wrapped up tightly and holding an umbrella. It had to be admitted that this girl was too wrapped up. It was already early June, and the weather was quite hot. It was still more than 20 degrees Celsius. Most people wore shorts, miniskirts, vests, and the like. Even if they were afraid of the cold, they would only wear a pair of trousers at most. But this girl was like an Arabian woman. Her body was wrapped in thick clothes, a thick scarf on her head, and big sunglasses. Not a trace of skin was exposed, but even so, she deliberately held a huge umbrella to cover herself completely. Such a strange dress naturally attracted a lot of attention, but the girl didn't care. She still walked forward while looking around. But before she found the person, Hai, and Bernice had already seen her. It couldn't be helped, her dress was really too eye-catching. Littleya, here. Looking at the girl in front of her, Bernice shouted loudly. Hearing Bernice's words, the girl named Littleya also looked over, then carried her luggage and ran over quickly. When she arrived, Hai took the initiative to take the luggage and let the two girls hug first. Sister, you've been waiting for a long time. Looking at Bernice, although the girl's expression couldn't be seen, her voice was still very sweet. Hearing her words, Hai couldn't help but understand in his heart. It turned out that these two people were sisters. Hai also said that if she was really just a patient, how could it be so troublesome? It's okay, we just arrived. Come, let me introduce you. This is Hai, the person who will cure your illness. This is my sister, you can call her Littleya. Listening to her sister's words, Bernice took out a piece of tissue from her bag, stretched it into the tightly wrapped apron, wiped the sweat on her forehead, and introduced her and Hai to each other. Hai? Oh, hello, sorry to trouble you this time. Hearing Bernice's words, the girl looked at Hai with some surprise, but she still reacted quickly. She nodded to Hai and said politely, "You're welcome. Come, let's go home first. You've been wrapped up like this, it's not comfortable." Hai didn't hear the surprise in her words. In fact, even if he heard it, at most, he just felt that this treatment was not very reliable. Hai didn't say much. After putting the luggage in the trunk, he opened the back door for the two girls. The two girls also got into the back seat and began to whisper. As for Hai, he took them back to his manor. The airport in Boston was really close to Hai's manor. After leaving the airport, they arrived in 10 minutes. The highway from the airport to Boston was easy to get stuck in traffic, but there was no traffic to Hai's house. After driving the car into the manor, Littleya, who had just arrived, had been looking at the scenery outside. To be honest, this was the first time in her life to come to such a place, and she felt curious about everything. After waiting for the car to park, Hai took the luggage, and the two girls walked into his villa together. As soon as they walked into the villa, they saw Delina and Marian teaching the capybara that Hai gave them yesterday how to use the toilet. These two little guys were eventually named Hua Hua and Bubbles by the two girls. These two names came from a cartoon, The Flying Policewoman. However, Hai really didn't like it. How could Hua Hua and Bubbles have the literary self-restraint of a sophomore? In addition to them, Hai's other pets were also here at this time, watching with a strong force. Seeing someone coming back, these animals, Delina, and Marian all raised their heads and looked over. Wow, hello. Feeling so many gazes, Littleya was obviously startled and said a little cautiously. Hearing her words, Delina and Marian also stood up immediately. Hello, you must be the sister who is going to live here for a while. Welcome, don't worry, our family's Jiang is very powerful. He can definitely cure your illness. Looking at the girl in front of her, Delina said immediately. Your family? However, hearing Delina's words, Littleya was stunned for a moment, and she glanced at Bernice faintly. The meaning in her eyes was obvious. What is the relationship between these two girls and Hai? They are my children, they don't look like it, but they are indeed my children. This is Delina, and this is Marian. If you have any problems in the future, you can ask them for help. Hai naturally saw her unnatural expression, so he said with a smile. Then I will have to trouble you in the future. My name is Littleya, nice to meet you. After hearing Hai's explanation, Littleya actually understood. They were probably adopted, but Hai is a single person, so can he adopt such a big daughter? She was also a little confused. However, she only came here to treat her illness, not to do a home visit and investigation, so the rest had nothing to do with her. It's okay. Hearing Littleya's weak voice, Delina and Marian also smiled. Well, you two continue to take care of these two little ones. We will go up first. Jiang Hai was very happy with the performance of his two daughters. After getting along with them for a period of time, the inferiority in their hearts was slowly disappearing. In the beginning, they would hide whenever someone came, but now, they could take the initiative to chat. Jiang Hai was also very pleased with their progress. After saying a few words to them, Jiang Hai carried his suitcase and went upstairs to the room that had already been prepared for him. When Jiang Hai and the two girls walked into the room, Lilia couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. Because compared to the curious outside, she was more familiar with this kind of environment. Walking in here, she finally found a sense of security. "This is your room." Jiang Hai pointed around and said to Lilia with a smile. "I am really grateful to you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lilia also said politely. While speaking, she took off her scarf and sunglasses, because in her opinion, it was very impolite to talk to others like this, but she had to do this outside. Now that she was in the room, she could let go a little. And Jiang Hai also saw this girl named Lilia for the first time. He had to admit that the moment she took off her scarf and sunglasses, Jiang Hai was shocked and speechless for a moment. The girl in front of him was like an elf in a fairy tale. Just like a vampire, her skin was so white that there was not a trace of blood in it. Her hair was also so white that there was not a trace of any other color. In addition, she had exquisite facial features. Because she had received treatment, her eyes did not become squinted. They were also very big and very lively. To be honest, if such a girl was hugged to sleep at night, he might be shocked, but looking at her like this, she was indeed quite beautiful. There was a special kind of beauty that made Jiang Hai's eyes stare straight for a moment. "Cough, it's okay, just treat this as your own home. I will prepare lunch. You can eat here at noon, and go downstairs at night." But after all, Jiang Hai is not a person who can't move when he sees a woman, so his surprise was only for a moment, and then he reacted. After smiling at Lilia, he took the initiative to leave. When Jiang Hai left, Lilia couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, facing a stranger like Jiang Hai. In fact, she was a little nervous. Don't look at this guy's usual sloppy appearance. In fact, this guy still has some skills. He should be able to cure your illness. Looking at the relieved Lilia in front of her, Bernice walked over, put her arm around her shoulder, and said with a distressed face. She really likes her sister, but unfortunately, God is always so unfair. "Sister, I have been used to it for so many years, it doesn't matter, but this Jiang Hai. Why does it sound familiar?" Looking at her sister, Lilia said with a smile, but then she frowned slightly, and asked her sister with a puzzled face. "Ah, yes, it is very familiar, it is the Jiang Hai in your mind." Hearing her words, Bernice also smiled. Chapter 389. "Jiang, are you going out?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was about to go out after lunch, Delina and Marian looked at him curiously. Originally, they wanted to ask Jiang Hai to help them build a nest for the two capybaras today. "Yeah, I'm going to catch some fish for dinner." "What's the matter?" Hearing the two girls' words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask them. "Oh, it's nothing, we just want to make a nest for Floey and Bubbles. They want to live by the water." "You told us." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Daliana and Marian on the other side said. Capybaras were called capybaras because of their characteristic of living by the water. Regardless of whether they were cubs or adults, they couldn't leave the water for too long. The sun outside would burn their fur, and they wouldn't be able to take it. For example, when Jiang Hai brought the two little guys back yesterday, Delina and Marian put them beside the bathtub in their room and slept for a night. However, they couldn't possibly not take a bath every day, or go to Jiang Hai's place to take a bath. So today, they needed to build a nest for the two little guys and move it to the swimming pool. The swimming pool? It might be a little far. After thinking about what Delina said, Jiang Hai pondered for a while. Indeed, the swimming pool was located near the winery. It was indeed a little far. Jiang Hai wasn't worried that Delina and Marian would be in any danger. Now that the two girls were very good at swimming, Jiang Hai was worried about the two little guys. If there was any danger, the two little guys wouldn't be able to protect themselves. Well, let's empty a guest room to build a nest for the two little guys first. As for building a nest for them outside, let's think about it. Looking at Delina and Marian in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. To be honest, they were a little worried about leaving the two little ones outside. Now that they heard Jiang Hai's words, they naturally agreed 120%. Then, Jiang Hai, Delina, and Marian stayed together. Jiang Hai went to get some wood. In an empty guest room, he built a nest for the two little guys. The nest was made by some small stairs that floated in the air. On one side was the stairs, which allowed them to go up and down. On the other side was a bathtub with a thin layer of water. In this way, he didn't have to worry about these little guys drowning. Secondly, he didn't have to worry about running out of water or falling on them. In the past, Jiang Hai would not have done these things. He only learned these things after he came to the United States. In the United States, whether it was a cowboy or a fisherman, they all had some handicrafts. It was really not difficult to build a small nest for a pet. As long as he had some patience, there would be no problem. After working until 4:00 in the afternoon, Jiang Hai finally finished setting up the nest. After that, he no longer cared about Delina and Marian's happy faces. He drove the four-wheeled motorcycle to the Manor's wharf. After saying a few words to Edward Anderson, who was already packing up, Zhang Heng drove the small boat away from the wharf. When they arrived at the junction of the coral reef area and the grazing area, Jiang Hai didn't call Big Fool over. Instead, he directly put down a fishing rod and prepared to catch a fish. He was ready to do whatever he could catch. Time was limited, so he didn't have the leisure to pick more fish. As for lobsters, to be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tired of eating them. Recently, he wanted to eat fish. Sitting on a chair with his hand on the fishing rod, Jiang Hai looked at the sunset in the distance, and the sea was dyed red. He suddenly felt that such a scene was really beautiful. If someone took a picture at this time, it could be used as a desktop when they went back. However, this was just a thought. He often saw such a beautiful scene here. In fact, not only here, but his forest, his grassland, his villa, and everything else could be used as a desktop after taking a picture. Of course, the premise was that the picture had to be good. Just like the pictures taken by Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi at Jiang Hai's place, after they were posted on the internet, although those otakus were most interested in the girls in the pictures, they were also fascinated by the scenery behind the girls. There were even a lot of people who used those photos as their phone wallpaper and computer desktop. Of course, those who had a partner or a wife wouldn't dare to do so, unless they wanted to be beaten or broken up. One day passed in the blink of an eye. TSK, how can there be a better life than this? What's the point of being busy every day? Looking at the scenery in front of him, Jiang Hai really liked this place more and more. Originally, he chose this place because it could provide him with an environment to upgrade. Later, he gradually liked this place because it could bring him wealth. When wealth and strength increased in both directions, he loved this place more and more because it could calm his heart. Jiang Hai was not like the ordinary young people who were crazy and ambitious before the age of 30. Jiang Hai felt that his ambition was slowly being wiped out in this land. To be honest, Jiang Hai felt that if he still had ambition now, it would be too tiring. And he was already used to being idle. If he was tired again, it might be okay for a few days, but for a long time, he wouldn't do anything. But then again, just like him now, he had nothing to do all day. In addition to fishing, catching lobsters, walking the dog, riding the horse, and the beautiful girls in the manor were everywhere. If necessary, he could drive to Boston or New York. With this attitude of life, plus the money he earned was more than 99% of the people in the world. What's the point of working hard? Being idle like this is sometimes the right way to go. Stephen Chow once said, "What's the difference between a person without dreams and a salted fish?" Well, Jiang Hai is actually a salted fish. The development of this side of the sea is almost done. As for the cattle on land and so on, we can just follow the routine. Sigh, I'd better enjoy my life honestly. However, I can think of a way to get some delicious food. Delicious food. Well, I haven't eaten eel for a long time. Oh right, eel, there isn't any here. I have to go back to China to get some. While enjoying the sea breeze, Jiang Hai whispered in a low voice. But after muttering for a while, he suddenly remembered something he used to like to eat: eel. Eel is a kind of freshwater eel, generally bred in the field. It is very common in the south of Huaxia, but in Jiang Hai's hometown of Bing City, it is almost absent. Jiang Hai also accidentally ate it in a Sichuan restaurant in Bing City, only then did he know that it was delicious. But in Bing City, there is no way to breed it. It is too expensive, so Jiang Hai has only eaten it a few times. Now that he thought about what he wanted to eat, Jiang Hai suddenly thought of this joke. However, Westerners don't eat eels. They eat eels, like the seven-gilled eel. Even in Europe, there were European kings who died because they ate eels. But they don't eat eel, whether it is eel or eel, they don't eat it. So it's quite difficult to eat eel here, but he can ask Mr. Zhang if there is a way. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about stir-frying the eel, he suddenly felt his fishing rod tighten for no reason. As the fishing rod tightened, Jiang Hai immediately pulled the fishing line. He felt the owner of the fishing line on the other side. Jiang Hai was very sure that he got hooked, and this thing was not very small, about half a meter long. This made him cheer up and start to pull the line. Generally, fishing is an essential part of sea fishing, because the fish is very strong in the water, and the fishing line is naturally thicker and stronger. But the fish will not eat the thick fishing line, and the fishing rod is the same. The stronger the fishing rod, the heavier it is. Of course, this refers to the case of the same material. Jiang Hai never has to worry about the problem of strength. So the fishing line and fishing rod he uses are the strongest. Although they are not the most expensive, they are the most durable. And because he only uses thick fishing lines, the above fish are not small fish, basically, they are all big fish. Jiang Hai pulled the fishing line quickly. Although the fish on the other side struggled hard, unfortunately, it is not the opponent of Jiang Hai. He can't break Jiang Hai's fishing rod, nor can he break the fishing line. His strength is completely suppressed by Jiang Hai, so death is inevitable. In just a dozen seconds, Jiang Hai collected all the money. On the other side of the fishing line, a silver-white fish is struggling hard. This fish is not very streamlined. Its whole body is silver-white, and there is a black spot on its tail that looks like an eye. Jiang Hai is very familiar with this fish. American redfish? After pulling the fish onto the boat, Jiang Hai looked at the fish that was still struggling and wanted to return to the water. Yes, this fish is the American redfish that Jiang Hai breeds the most. The American redfish is also known as ocellated rockfish. It belongs to the rockfish family. It is native to the Atlantic Ocean of the United States, but now there is a lot of production in China. This fish is actually the best fish in the ordinary people's home, the big yellow flower. The big yellow flower is a rockfish, and so is this fish. It's just that the big yellow flower can't be farmed, but this fish can. But to be honest, the taste of these two fish is actually the same, especially the fish that grew up in the wild. In China, this fish can grow to 36 centimeters in a year and a half, and 55 centimeters in 2 years. In the southern breeding areas, it can grow more than 1 kilogram in a year, reach maturity in 4 years, and can be bred. This fish should not be the fish raised by Jiang Hai. Although Jiang Hai's fish have spiritual energy, it is only 3 months old after all, and it can't grow so big. And this fish is so big, it is likely to have swum from the outer sea. Taking off the fishing hook, Jiang Hai weighed it. This fish is about 4 kilograms. It is really not a small fish. Its body length is nearly 70 centimeters, which is a lot longer than Jiang Hai's original judgment of half a meter. Looking at this fish, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart. With the beef and other things, it is almost enough for them to eat, so he put away the things, threw the fish into the fish warehouse, and went home. Chapter 390. The taste of American red fish was almost the same as large yellow croaker, but the price was much lower. At the seaside, the wholesale price of red fish was about 60 yuan per catty. Of course, this was the domestic price. In the United States, a pound of red fish was about $8, which was much more expensive than codfish. Of course, the output couldn't be compared with codfish, but Jiang Hai didn't care about this. He had a way to increase the output. This kind of fish was mainly delicious, so the best way to cook it was to steam it, especially live fish. After Jiang Hai came back, he prepared to do this. First, he fished the fish out and knocked it out. Then, he killed the fish, removed the internal organs, and scraped the scales. After everything was done, he shredded the ginger and shredded the scallion. He put some of them into the fish's stomach and body. At the same time, he poured some cooking wine and began to marinate it. After marinating it for about 10 minutes, he steamed it in the steamer. After steaming it for 10 minutes, he took it down and poured the soup away. At the same time, he threw away the shredded ginger and onion in the fish's stomach. Then, he poured some steamed fish and bean drum on the fish's body. After that, he put some shredded ginger and onion on the fish's body. Then, he heated up the oil in the pot and added some pepper. After that, he threw the pepper out and sprinkled the pepper oil on the fish's body. It could be said that it was a very simple dish, but it could preserve the freshness of the fish to the greatest extent. When Jiang Hai was cooking, the smell of the fish began to reverberate in the villa. Not only did it attract Alina and Marian, but even Bernice and Xiaoya, who were on the second floor, came over. The Boston area was in the easternmost part of the United States, so every day, the sun rose early in the morning and set early in the evening. Even if there was East American time, there was only an hour time difference. When Jiang Hai finished fishing and came back, the sky was already completely dark. When the sky was dark, there was no sun. This was also the time for Xiaoya to move around. This was also the first time that she looked at Jiang Hai's villa in a serious manner. When Delina and Marian saw the pure white Xiaoya, they couldn't help but be stunned. They had never seen such a white person. Is there anything I can do? After walking around the villa, Xiaoya couldn't help but secretly nod. Jiang Hai's villa was indeed not small. It was much bigger than her family's villa in the country. Going to the balcony and looking at the moonlight and starlight outside, this kind of feeling was not only in the country, but also in foreign cities. It could only be seen in the countryside. Jiang Hai's place was the standard countryside. However, because Bernice was afraid that she would catch a cold, she only looked around before bringing her back. When she was waiting for dinner in the living room, she was still a little embarrassed. She took the initiative to go to the kitchen, wanting to help Jiang Hai with something. No need, no need. I'm not going to make any big dishes. The fish is already done. I'll fry the steak and we can eat. Looking at the girl in front of him, Jiang Hai shook his head. She was a guest, and he was too embarrassed to ask her for help. The salad hasn't been mixed yet, right? I can help. However, Xiaoya saw the vegetable salad in the bowl in the distance and couldn't help but ask Jiang Hai with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, then nodded. If she really wants to help, then let her help. Seeing Jiang Hai nodding, Xiaoya also smiled and went to the refrigerator to take out ketchup and salad dressing. It has to be said that when he was in the country, Jiang Hai still liked to eat these two kinds of sauces. But after arriving in the United States, people here eat these two kinds of sauces every day, and Jiang Hai was tired of eating them. So usually, he only eats meat. When he wants to eat vegetables, such as lettuce, carrots, and so on, he will eat them dry. Wow, the sauces here are really complete. Do you want to try our northeastern cold dishes? Seeing Jiang Hai's eyebrows twitching when she took out the 2 sauces, Xiaoya couldn't help but smile. She put the sauces back into the fridge, then looked at the sauces in the fridge and said excitedly, Homemade cold dishes? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, because he hasn't eaten it for a while. Can I make it? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaoya also smiled and said happily, Of course. When he heard about homemade cold dishes, to be honest, Jiang Hai was also a little moved. It is really not an easy thing to eat authentic Huaxia dishes here. Even if it is a cold dish, no one can make it, and the most important thing is that the ingredients are not available. In the United States, there were tofu sellers and dried tofu sellers, but there were no dried tofu sellers. This was what annoyed Jiang Hai the most. At the same time, aside from Old Zhang, there were no other places that sold wood ears. The fans are basically the same, so he has to admit that the cultural difference between the 2 places is still too big, and it is difficult to have a common point. However, under Jiang Hai's diligent collection, although there was still no dried tofu or skin care, the 2 most classic cold dishes, there were still other things. It's just that he didn't know how to mix them before, but now that there was someone who knew how to mix them, it was naturally excellent. Hearing that Jiang Hai agreed, Xiaoya immediately got busy. She opened the lid of sesame sauce, made some sesame sauce, poured vinegar, seafood soy sauce, some salt and chicken essence into it. There is also a need to explain here. Americans and Europeans almost don't eat chicken essence and monosodium glutamate, even for soup. They just use sauces for flavor and put some salt. That's it. So when Jiang Hai bought all the chicken essence, except for himself, Delina and Marian ate very little. But this time, there is finally someone to eat with him, and Jiang Hai is still very gratified. I heard that you are also from the Northeast? While mixing the sauce, Xiaoya asked Jiang Hai casually. Oh, yes, I am from Bing City. Seeing her posture and look like she knows how to cook, Jiang Hai no longer paid attention to her. Now, he still needs to fry the steak, and hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaoya's cute eyebrows wrinkled again. What a coincidence. My hometown is also in Bingcheng. Come to think of it, I haven't been home for a long time. I didn't even go back during Chinese New Year, Xiaoya said with some melancholy as she mixed the sauce. You can go back this Chinese New Year. Don't worry, I am still very confident about your illness. Listening to little Ya's slightly melancholic words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. Looking at this pitiful girl, it was actually very easy for Jiang Hai to save her. He could use his spiritual qi to cure all diseases. Not to mention albinism, even leukemia would be cured. But the problem is, just like what Bernice said, there is no way to cover it up when the time comes. It was better to let her eat food with spiritual energy and slowly transfer spiritual energy to her. In this way, it wouldn't be long before her albinism was cured, and this period of time was the best time for her to recover. Then I really have to thank you. If my illness is cured, you must come to my house in Bing City to play. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, little Ya also smiled and said. However, Jiang Hai didn't know why, but when he heard it, he felt a bit awkward. Then he shook his head and laughed at himself. Thinking so much about a word of thanks, it seems that he is getting more and more pretentious. At this time, his beef was fried, and little Ya's sauce was also done. After changing the knife of the vegetables in the basin, she skillfully poured the sauce in. Soon, a large basin of cold dishes with the fragrance of sesame sauce was mixed. Smelling this aroma, Jiang Hai's mouth secreted saliva faster. He also quickened his pace. After the beef was mixed, 3 large dishes were placed on the table. When they saw the dishes on the table, Delina and Marian couldn't help but be stunned. This is because they have eaten fish and beef before. But they really haven't eaten this cold dish before. Out of curiosity, they picked up a piece. To be honest, the taste is a little strange. Although they like to eat the sour taste of ketchup and salad dressings, they don't like the sour taste of vinegar. But what surprised them was that the taste of vinegar and sesame sauce was not too strong. Instead, it gave them a very refreshing feeling. It was even more refreshing than ketchup and salad dressings. After eating the first bite, they rushed to the second bite. Coupled with the chili oil, there was a hint of spiciness. It was really satisfying. On the other side, Jiang Hai and Xiaoya also sat there and began to eat. To be honest, Xiaoya was really full of praise for Jiang Hai's beef. The quality of the beef was really good. She was also quite satisfied with the American red fish. It can be said that the two dishes in Jiang Hai's manner were an eye-opener for her. She kept giving a thumbs up. Of course, this thumbs up was only for the ingredients. Jiang Hai's cooking skills, he didn't seriously learn how to cook. He just made it according to her requirements. It can only be said that it was simple. I say, besides beef and seafood, is there nothing else to eat here? On the other hand, although Bernice was also struggling with the beef, she looked at Jiang Hai with some curiosity. Not really. There are chickens over there, pure little stupid chickens. They are all free-range. They eat grain in winter and insects in summer. They have not been fed any food. There is also a wyvern over there, which is our country's second-class protected animal. There is also a wild boar in the freezer that has been cleaned up, but I don't know how to cook these things. Listening to Bernice's words, Jiang Hai thought about it carefully. He seemed to be almost used to eating beef and seafood. In the past, in China, the people mainly ate pork. When Jiang Hai first came, he also wanted to eat pork. But to be honest, pork in the United States was not easy to buy. The wild boar that they hunted in the mountains had a particularly strong smell. The dishes that were cooked were almost inedible. The wyvern was cooked when Fu Yuan came last time. It was fresh, but the heat was not easy to control. Chapter 391. There are so many ingredients. Since we're living here, we're a little embarrassed. How about this? I'll be in charge of dinner in the future. You just need to prepare the ingredients. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice didn't say anything, but Xiaoya spoke first with a smile. Now that she had taken off her scarf, she was indeed much more cheerful than she was in the morning. You know how to cook? Hearing Xiaoya's words, Jiang Hai asked with some surprise. Then he patted his head and remembered that Xiaoya had just made a cold dish. It was indeed not very good for him to question her like this. Don't underestimate my sister. Although she is young, she has been very interested in cooking since she was a child. She has worshipped many top chefs as her teachers. Our Northeast cuisine, Sichuan cuisine, Beijing cuisine, Shandong cuisine, Zhejiang cuisine, she is proficient in all of them. This time you have to treat her well, and then you will have a good meal. Hearing Jiang Hai's questioning words, Bernice also said with a smile. It's not as scary as sister said, but I can still make some home-cooked dishes. Because I couldn't go to school in the past, I could only study at home. There was no time to play, and the teacher almost didn't give me any homework. In addition, everyone in the family was very busy, so most of the free time, I learned some cooking skills. My mother said that girls who can cook are more likely to marry in the future. Hearing Bernice's words, Lilia couldn't help but shyly lower her head. But even if she was a little shy, there was no trace of blood on her face. Speaking of which, Jiang Hai really pitied her more and more. Okay, then I'll wait for delicious food tomorrow. What ingredients do you need? Tell me. Looking at the lonely expression on Xiaoya's face, Jiang Hai immediately changed the topic and asked her with a happy face. That depends on what you want to eat. Looking at Jiang Hai, Xiaoya's mood seemed to have changed. After all, after so many years, she has been somewhat used to it. Looking at Jiang Hai, she asked with a happy face. It has always been her wish to be able to help others. Let me think. Do you know how to cook the charred pork strips? Thinking of the dishes that he wanted to eat, Jiang Hai asked with an expectant look. That's not a problem, but I need non-spicy green and red peppers, carrots, sweet and sour. I saw it just now, and pork tenderloin and starch. It's best if it's potato. Looking at Jiang Hai, Xiaoya reported the ingredients she needed. We have green and red peppers in the vegetable garden. We also have carrots. As for pork, is wild boar okay? I remember buying starch, but I don't know if it's used up. He thought for a moment. He didn't lack vegetables here. Green and red peppers were also Americans' favorite food. The amount of carrots planted in Jiang Hai's manor was the largest, because not only people needed to eat them, but also horses needed to eat them. The only thing that he had some doubts about was the starch. He didn't know if there was still any left. Thinking about this, Jiang Hai specially went to the kitchen. After seeing that there was still some left, he happily told Xiaoya that there was starch. This was the most important thing, and he knew about it. Wild boar is also okay. But before cooking it, it needs to be marinated to get rid of the earthy smell. Well, this is a dish. Is there anything else you want to eat? Hearing that Jiang Hai had all kinds of ingredients here, Xiaoya nodded with satisfaction and then asked happily. Can you cook kung pao chicken? After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai said the second dish that he wanted to eat. Is it Sichuan cuisine or Zhejiang cuisine? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaoya also raised her eyebrows and asked. Obviously, she was really passionate about cooking. She looked at Jiang Hai with a smile and asked. Sichuan cuisine or Zhe cuisine is also okay. I'm a little conflicted. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little conflicted. Kung Pao chicken and Yuxiang pork line are both serious Sichuan cuisine. Kung Pao chicken was originally evolved from Shandong cuisine's soy sauce chicken and added the taste of the expensive spicy chicken. At the end of the Qing dynasty, a new dish was formed, Kung Pao chicken. There were many versions in China, but the main versions were divided into two categories. One was the Sichuan cuisine version, and the other was the Northeast cuisine version, also called the Zhejiang cuisine version. Because when the previous dynasty resisted the invasion of Japan, the previous dynasty's government moved to Mountain City. At that time, Mountain City was not a municipality directly under the central government. It was still one of the Shu lands. Naturally, the dishes were also Sichuan cuisine. However, the previous dynasty's emperor was from the Jiangxia area. He was not used to this taste, so his chef improved it and made the Sichuan cuisine into the sour and sweet taste that the people of Zhejiang liked to eat. And the supreme commander of the northeast, Xiao Shuai, was the sworn brother of the previous dynasty's emperor. He also liked to eat these dishes very much, so he promoted them to the Northeast Army at that time. Later, after the war ended, people also promoted the cooking of these dishes. However, after all, the Jiangxia area had its own cuisine, so it was not easy to integrate it. There was no clear cuisine in the Northeast, so these dishes took root in the Northeast. Now, many Kung Pao chicken were sour and sweet, but they were actually spicy. Then let's make both. It's not a big deal. You have chickens here, so let's kill one tomorrow. I'll use the meat from the drumstick to make the Sichuan-style one, and the meat from the Yuhuang chicken to make the sweet and sour one. Then, I'll use the rest of the chicken to make chicken soup. If you can still catch fish tomorrow, I'll make another braised fish, and stir-fry the beef with ziran. Looking at Jiang Hai's tangled look, Xiaoya also smiled and said. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was already drooling. I regret what I did tonight. Let's look forward to tomorrow's dinner first. Looking at Xiaoya, Jiang Hai really felt that his spiritual energy this time was worth it. To be honest, if he hadn't promised Bernice, he really wouldn't have used his spiritual energy to save others. Yes, Jiang Hai was not as narrow-minded as Feng Yunshan said. He was a very selfish person. Why should his things be used by others? No matter how pitiful this person was, he still had a heart of stone. This was also his golden finger. If it was some kind of high-tech or something like that, even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't give it to the country. These things had nothing to do with him. He was such a person. Don't try to reason with him, he wouldn't listen. This time, he saved Xiaoya because he owed Bernice a big favor. Now, he felt that if Xiaoya's culinary skills were really good, then he seemed to have really profited. I hope I won't disappoint you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Xiaoya also smiled and said seriously. Next, everyone continued to eat dinner. After dinner, everyone sat on the sofa and watched TV while discussing the time when Xiaoya would cook. Jiang Hai wanted to take advantage of this time to buy all the things he wanted to buy. But basically, it was just Jiang Hai and Xiaoya talking. Bernice didn't care about these things at all, while Delina and Marian had never been to Huaxia. They also didn't know what the authentic taste of these dishes were, so they couldn't get a word in. Unknowingly, it was already time to sleep. The 5 people returned to their rooms and began to sleep. But this night, it was destined that 2 people wouldn't be able to sleep easily. One of them was Jiang Hai, because he was thinking about what to eat tomorrow. No one knew about Jiang Hai's obsession with eating. To be honest, the current Jiang Hai had money, leisure, and women. The only thing left in his life was to eat. Now that he suddenly had a chef, there was really nothing happier than this. The other person who was suffering from insomnia was Xiaoya. It was her first time in an unfamiliar place, yet she could fall asleep so easily. Only a careless person would be able to do this. However, other than the fact that she was a little picky about her bed, everything else was fine. Because here, she didn't have those troubles in the past. She could live with her sister in a fairy tale-like manner. There were a lot of animals, green grass, blue sky, and sea here. This kind of life, in fact, was what she had yearned for a long time ago. The only regret was that she couldn't see these things during the day. But no matter what, looking at the night scenery was a very beautiful thing, at least in her opinion. It was a silent night. Jiang Hai and Xiaoya didn't know when they fell asleep. When Jiang Hai woke up the next day, Bernice's boxing was almost done. Jiang Hai didn't go for a run first, because the amount of exercise could be guaranteed. So he got up first to make breakfast. Because Xiaoya couldn't leave her room during the day, he had to send it to her. Of course, Jiang Hai wouldn't forget Azalina. This woman was really living a good life recently. After everything was done, Jiang Hai went to prepare the ingredients. In the morning, he went to the vegetable garden to pick vegetables and kill the chicken at the same time. To be honest, this was the first time Jiang Hai killed a chicken, and it was under Xiaoya's guidance. Because after Jiang Hai caught the chicken, he really didn't know how to do it. Bernice specially called Xiaoya and put it on speaker to kill the chicken. The feathers were removed, the blood was drained, and the internal organs were removed. Of course, the internal organs wouldn't be thrown away. The heart, liver, and other things inside were all very delicious. After eating something for lunch, Jiang Hai went out to sea in the afternoon. Because today, not only did he want to catch fish, he also wanted to make some other things. The things he made in the past were basically wasted. Last night, he told Xiaoya about it and realized how wasteful he was. Just steamed lobster was good, but if it was processed, it could be made into lobster that could be eaten 3 times. There was also steamed lobster with garlic, sashimi, and so on. Jiang Hai didn't want to eat it because he didn't like to eat it raw. As for abalones, the best way to cook them was naturally not steamed, but braised and simmered. However, Jiang Hai didn't know how to cook them. Sea cucumbers didn't only cook scallion roast. There were also scallion oil, braised in soy sauce, clear soup, sea cucumber with fungus, tea-flavored sea cucumber, and so on. The cooking methods of sea cucumbers were also very strange. However, Jiang Hai also didn't know how to cook them. Not to mention that he didn't know how to cook, he actually didn't eat these things before. After all, before he came here, he was also a good youth of the new era who didn't work hard and couldn't differentiate between grains. What he knew now was all learned from Dr. Philip. That was all he knew. But now that there was a chef, Jiang Hai felt that it was time for him to eat his fill. So today, not only did he prepare a fish, he also prepared some other ingredients. He would cook slowly, anyway, she wouldn't be done so quickly. Chapter 392. Big Fool, It's Time to Eat. Driving the boat, Jiang Hai flew all the way to the place where he usually called Big Fool. This was the middle point between the coral reef and the stocking area. Jiang Hai liked this place very much because he could catch a lot of fish here, and he could also get a lot of lobsters, abalones, sea cucumbers, and so on. He didn't need to go deep into the coral reef. It was a very good place. After all, there were not only lobsters, abalones, sea cucumbers, and fish living in the coral reef, but there were also many creatures that were dangerous to humans. For example, sea snakes, sea anemones, stonefish, cockles, jellyfish, and so on. Jiang Hai liked his current life very much, so if it was not necessary, he would not go into the coral reef. Even if he went in, he would dress neatly. It was impossible for him to dress like now. Knocking on the side of the boat, Jiang Hai also shouted a few words into the sea, then he injected spirit energy into a piece of beef that he brought over. This was to supplement the nutrition of Big Fool and his wife. But this time, after he threw the beef into the sea, Big Fool and his wife, who usually rushed over to eat when they smelled the beef, waited for a long time this time. The piece of beef had completely sunk to the bottom of the sea. Countless fish were eating the meat, but they didn't see Big Fool and his wife. This made Jiang Hai frown. What's going on? Did they go somewhere else to play? Just when Jiang Hai felt a little strange and was about to directly go down to catch lobsters without waiting for Big Fool, suddenly, a vertical fin quickly came from a distance. Looking at the dorsal fin, Jiang Hai smiled, because the owner of the dorsal fin was none other than Big Fool's wife. In fact, the sharks in the sea were really interesting. Just like the cat shark, they were only so small in size. But the rat shark was very big. This shark, since receiving Jiang Hai's spirit energy, became smarter and bigger. It was impossible for it to surpass Big Fool, who was carefully raised by Jiang Hai, but surpassing ordinary rat sharks was not a problem. It's you, where's Big Fool? Seeing it coming over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk to the side of the boat and shouted at it. However, this rat shark was not in a hurry to eat the meat below at this time, but it was circling Jiang Hai's boat, as if it was very anxious. Looking at its appearance, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? In Jiang Hai's sight, the rat shark floated up and bit Jiang Hai's boat, wanting to take the boat in another direction. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's boat was not an ordinary boat. It was also built with a lot of money. Obviously, it was not something it could move, which made it even more anxious. It wanted to swim away, but it seemed to want to let Jiang Hai know something, so it kept circling here. Do you want me to go with you? Seeing the rat shark busy here for a few minutes, Jiang Hai asked tentatively. Then he turned on the engine. Sure enough, as soon as the engine was turned on, the rat shark rushed in the direction where it came from. Jiang Hai saw that it really wanted him to follow, so he directly started the engine and followed the rat shark in that direction. After driving for about 10 minutes, Jiang Hai found a bloody smell floating on the sea level in front of him. After arriving at this area, the rat shark was faster. After about 3 minutes, many shark dorsal fins appeared in front of Jiang Hai. Among these shark dorsal fins, Jiang Hai saw the biggest one very conspicuously and he was most familiar with it. The scene at this time was needless to say, it seemed that Big Fool was besieged. Damn, you dare to be arrogant in my territory. Looking at the scene that seemed to have entered a chaotic battle, Jiang Hai cursed and then got into the boat. Although he was also very anxious now, without equipment, he couldn't fight so many sharks in the sea. As for the rat shark, after bringing Jiang Hai over, it had already rejoined the battle circle. After Jiang Hai put on a diving suit at the fastest speed, he took a fish arrow, a spear gun, and 2 long daggers for close combat in the water and dived into the water. As soon as he entered the water, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be shocked. Because at this time, there were nearly 20 sharks underwater, and in the middle was naturally Big Fool and the rat shark couple. Beside them, there were many sharks. These sharks were about the same size, and they were all the same species. Hammerhead shark, also known as double hammerhead shark. Most sharks were not very smart, so they were all lone wolves. And this kind of shark was very rare. They were very big, but they liked to be in groups. A group of double hammerhead sharks, even if a great white shark saw them in the sea, it would have to avoid them. They were the real overlords of the sea. But this time, for some reason, they came to Jiang Hai's territory. Big Fool won't retreat, so they fought together. In fact, Jiang Hai's thoughts were almost the same. These sharks actually came to Jiang Hai's territory to track a group of tuna. However, Big Fool will let the tuna go, but Big Fool naturally won't let these guys go. In the past, Big Fool was just a sand tiger shark. He wasn't a real tiger shark. He didn't confront these large sharks head-on, so although he was the biggest shark here, to be honest, he was now at a disadvantage. When Jiang Hai went into the water, he saw that there were many wounds on Big Fool's body, especially on the gills. The shark's vital point has been torn by these sharks, but these sharks were almost uninjured. If Big Fool's body wasn't strong enough, he might have been torn apart by them. But even so, Big Fool was extremely passive at this time. If Jiang Hai came more than 10 minutes later, he might not even be able to collect Big Fool's body. The name of the underwater wolf pack was not for nothing. At this time, these sharks were constantly wandering in the water, looking for opportunities to attack Big Fool. What the F***ck, looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse. Without hesitation, he picked up a fish arrow and placed it on his spear. Aiming at a shark that was still wandering around, he pulled the trigger. With a whoosh sound, the arrow flew straight towards the shark. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curse. He didn't hold back and directly picked up a fish arrow, then put it on his spear and aimed at a shark that was still wandering around. The shark didn't expect that the attack would come from below. Before it had time to react, it was already pierced by Jiang Hai's fish arrow. The pain made the shark constantly struggle, but the more it struggled, the bigger the wound became, and the more blood flowed. The situation here also attracted the attention of other sharks. When Big Fool saw that it was Jiang Hai, his eyes flashed with a trace of relief. This is a good thing. Immediately, he swung his tail, and his body was like an arrow leaving the bow. He went up and bit the shark that was shot by Jiang Hai. The shark's head was flat, and in an instant, the shark twitched and slowly fell from the sea. And this attack was like a bugle horn that signaled the attack. The other sharks also swarmed up at the same time. If it was only Big Fool and his wife, it would probably be a disaster, but now there was also Jiang Hai. The spear gun's power was still quite good. Before these sharks had time to pounce, Jiang Hai shot another fish arrow, directly hitting the fastest shark, and piercing it again. At this time, the group of hammerhead sharks noticed Jiang Hai's existence. They didn't know what signal these sharks used to send, but most of the sharks were still besieging Big Fool. However, there were 4 sharks that rushed towards Jiang Hai. In the water, Jiang Hai couldn't swim faster than sharks, but these guys came over. Jiang Hai was not to be trifled with. The last experience in the deep sea made Jiang Hai have some confidence. Besides, even if he didn't have confidence, he still had to go. If he had to think about everything, then what's the point of being a human? So Jiang Hai immediately shot another fish arrow at the 4 sharks. Although the reaction of the 4 sharks was not slow, and they all dodged in the first place, one of them was still scratched on the tail fin, and its speed was greatly reduced. But even so, the 4 sharks still pounced on Jiang Hai and bit him. Just as they were about to bite, Jiang Hai's 4th arrow was already loaded. But even at such a close distance, the reaction of the sharks was not slow. The first shark dodged sideways and dodged the arrow. Jiang Hai almost saw a trace of playfulness in its small eyes, but this trace of playfulness quickly dissipated. Because at the moment when it dodged sideways, Jiang Hai also took out the long dagger tied to his leg and stabbed it into the guy's chest. Then the guy struggled there and lost its fighting power. But even if one was killed, there were still 3 sharks in front of Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai could only be glad that this was a double hammerhead shark. The largest one was 3.7 meters to 4.3 meters. If there were 3 great white sharks, Jiang Hai would probably die. Looking at the 2 sharks that rushed over first, Jiang Hai did not panic. He immediately punched the nose of a double hammerhead shark. As mentioned before, the 2 major weaknesses of sharks were their nose and eyes. The biggest feature of a double hammerhead shark was its nose, and its flat head was the evolved form of its nose. He only felt a shock in his hand, and this shark was already a little stunned by Jiang Hai's punch. Its body stopped, and it was about to turn white. But at this moment, another shark had already rushed over and bit Jiang Hai. At this moment, Jiang Hai's hand holding the dagger did not retreat but directly put it into this guy's mouth. This guy struggled in an instant, maybe it wanted to fight to the death. It also bit its mouth hard, but unfortunately, it did not bite. Chapter 393. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai came down after wearing a diving suit. Maybe he had no impression of it. Jiang Hai's diving suit was not like an ordinary diving suit. It was only a black diving suit. When he was diving in Miami, he specially asked Moses Adams to buy him a diving suit with a metal exterior. That thing can't even be pierced by a knife, let alone the teeth of these sharks. Although the teeth of these sharks are very sharp, but no matter how sharp they can't be sharper than a knife. Therefore, Jiang Hai only felt pain in his arm, but it didn't even scratch his skin. If it was not a hammerhead shark, but a great white shark or a killer whale, Jiang Hai's arm might be broken. But the problem was that it was not, so Jiang Hai put the dagger in the shark's mouth in an instant and directly stirred the shark's mouth into a mess. The shark may also feel the pain in its mouth, and it immediately spat out Jiang Hai's arm. After spitting it out, Jiang Hai had nothing to say. He stepped on the ground and slowly floated up. He held the dagger with both hands and stabbed it into the shark's brain. In an instant, the shark trembled and slowly floated down. He turned around and slashed the belly of the shark that was just about to react when Jiang Hai smashed it into a daze. In an instant, the intestines, stomach, and so on all flowed out of the hammerhead shark's body. The hammerhead shark was still struggling. It didn't want to die, but unfortunately, it had been cut open, so it had to die even if it didn't want to. Seeing Jiang Hai take care of his 3 companions, the last hammerhead shark to arrive couldn't help but stare blankly. Although sharks would go crazy after smelling blood, this most intelligent hammerhead shark obviously knew that the guy in front of it was not easy to deal with. Even if they went crazy, they were still animals. Animals would be afraid, even if they were stupid. So this hammerhead shark, after seeing Jiang Hai take care of its companions so quickly, turned and swam away immediately, but it did not know that it was easier to die this way. Jiang Hai picked up the spear that fell beside him. Without saying a word, he shot an arrow and shot it. This time, the hammerhead shark that was determined to escape could not escape. It was directly shot by Jiang Hai. It struggled powerlessly in the sea, and Jiang Hai did not stop. He continued to shoot. In the blink of an eye, with Jiang Hai's long-range DPS attack, the hammerhead sharks that were besieging Big Fool were also shot one by one. They spun and fell back into the sea. Soon, the group of hammerhead sharks felt that something was wrong. Maybe it was the leader's order. Of course, Jiang Hai could not hear this frequency, but these sharks could. The remaining 10 or so sharks swam away quickly. But Jiang Hai's fishing ground was not a place where they could come and go as they pleased. He waved his hand at Big Fool, who swam to Jiang Hai's side immediately. Jiang Hai also flipped over and rode on Big Fool. Then, he pressed his right hand and a stream of spirit energy was directly injected into Big Fool's body. Although Big Fool's spirit energy had basically been developed to the extreme and would not fluctuate much anymore, this stream of spirit energy still caused the wounds on its body to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Its spirit also instantly became better. With a flick of its tail, the advantage of its large size and fast running was undoubtedly displayed at this time. Almost instantly, it caught up with the sharks. Jiang Hai was like a knight of the sea. His legs were firmly wrapped around Big Fool, but his hand readied the spear. He aimed at a shark that was running away and shot an arrow. The shark didn't have time to react and fell to the bottom of the sea. It was dead. With the death of the shark, the other sharks seemed to have understood the situation. If they ran like this, none of them would be able to escape. Then, the remaining 9 would scatter and escape. Jiang Hai immediately shot an arrow. After killing another shark, the remaining 8 sharks were really not easy to chase. He could only chase after one shark and kill another one. After that, he floated to the surface of the sea. Looking at the remaining 7 sharks that had already escaped, Jiang Hai was a little worried. These guys will definitely hold a grudge. If they come back to find trouble, the 7 sharks probably won't be able to beat them. It seems that the protection under the water needs to be increased a little. Patting Big Fool's head, Jiang Hai muttered. Big Fool was very happy that his master could come to save him this time. He took Jiang Hai to walk around the sea. Looking at the appearance of Big Fool and his wife, Jiang Hai also frowned. How to enhance the defensive capabilities of the seabed is a big matter in his mind. Although the enemy was defeated this time, it doesn't mean that the enemy won't come next time. Jiang Hai needs to find some helpers for Big Fool, but Big Fool isn't giving any help. Is he a male protagonist in a pure romance novel? Why did he only find one wife? He has such a big body, but he only has one wife. He is not afraid that he can't stand it. However, Big Fool is innocent, so Jiang Hai can't say anything. In addition to injecting his wife with spiritual energy to help her evolve faster, Jiang Hai seems to really need to find some reliable helpers for Big Fool. The seabed can't be like the surface of the sea. Jiang Hai can increase the number of ships and aircraft on the surface of the sea. Basically, if there is no war, then he is very safe here. But the seabed is different. Jiang Hai can't buy a submarine. Even if the United States is a quite open country, it is impossible to sell submarines to individuals. This is also one of the most annoying things for Jiang Hai. He wants to strengthen the defense under the sea, so he can only find some fish. However, he really can't think of a fish that can resist the attack of sharks, be very obedient, and be easy to tame. Right, I don't need fish, right? Just as he was struggling there, he suddenly slapped his forehead. He was thinking about fish just now. It's okay if it's not fish, for example, the legendary dolphin. As soon as he thought of dolphins, Jiang Hai's thoughts began to wander. In addition to dolphins, another marine mammal seemed to be a good choice. For example, killer whales. If these big creatures were here, how could sharks dare to come here? Cough, but then again, if this pet monster becomes Jiang Hai's pet, how many fish will he have left here? So it's better to take back his divergent thoughts for the time being. Forget about the killer whale, but dolphins can be considered. If there are some smart dolphins to join, and then there is a giant like Big Fool to lead, it is estimated that his defense under the sea will not be a big problem. Thinking of his favorite game in the past, the strongest naval equipment of the Allied Army, it is not the Aegis cruiser, and it is also not the aircraft carrier. It is this extremely strong dolphin that is so powerful under the water that it is terrifying. On the land of Russia, the strongest is naturally the giant squid. If it is not because it is impossible in the real world to have a squid that can tie up an aircraft carrier, Jiang Hai would want to catch one and try it. But no matter what, raising dolphins is still very reliable. However, once the thoughts are out, it is not easy to take them back. Since dolphins can be raised, then squid can also be considered. It's not that big. I'll just use my spiritual energy to make it that big. Big Fool can only grow 3 4 meters, but now it has grown to more than 10 meters. The giant spear squid can grow to a maximum of 20 meters. Does this mean that it can grow 3 times longer and reach 60 meters? A 60-meter squid. After Jiang Hai thought about it, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. If someone dares to mess with him in the future, that 60-meter squid would be enough to scare them to death. Even if they don't die, they would still be scared to death. But it is useless to say this now. Jiang Hai has not even caught a giant squid. It is better to consider the problem of how to domesticate dolphins. Dolphins should be the focus of the National Environmental Protection Organization's monitoring. Japan killed some and almost caused a riot. If Jiang Hai wants to buy them, it is still relatively unreliable. If he can't buy them, he can only seduce some back. Invincibility is so lonely. Just as Jiang Hai was thinking about how to get some dolphins back, suddenly his mobile phone in the waterproof bag at his waist rang. Jiang Hai picked it up and saw that it was Bernice calling. "Hello, what's the matter?" Taking it, Jiang Hai asked curiously. "It's nothing, it's just that Lilia wants to tell you not to catch fish that are too big. If you can't do it, it will be a waste." Listening to Jiang Hai's voice, Bernice on the other side also said, Fish." As soon as it was mentioned, Jiang Hai remembered that he seemed to have come to catch fish and lobsters. After the fierce battle just now, it is already 3:00 in the afternoon. It is necessary to speed up. Just as Jiang Hai was about to return, he suddenly remembered that he had been busy for the whole afternoon and there seemed to be some spoils. "By the way, Bernice, ask Lilia if she can make shark fin?" Thinking of this, Jiang Hai immediately asked. "Shark fin? She can make it, but aren't sharks a protected animal? Where do you get shark fin?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice on the other side was stunned for a moment, then asked him, but Jiang Hai didn't answer her. "It's fine as long as she knows how to make it." Diving back to the bottom of the sea, he found the sharks that he had killed one by one. There was no other way, these sharks were all bleeding to death, and Big Idiot's sense of smell was definitely the strongest. Finding these corpses in the water could not be any easier. After finding the bodies, Jiang Hai cut off the 2 shark fins. As for the bodies, if Big Idiot wants to eat them, Big Idiot and his wife can eat them. If they don't want to eat them, they will be fed to other fish. Although sharks are the overlords of the sea when they are alive. But after death, the small fish that were originally just their food are now competing for these behemoths. Jiang Hai killed a total of 12 sharks. It took him nearly 2 hours to find all the sharks. After cutting the shark fins, Jiang Hai had no interest in the rest of the shark meat. Carrying the thick stack of shark fins, Jiang Hai rowed Big Idiot back to his boat. He has always heard that shark fins are delicious. He wants to try it tonight. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.